Chapter 141, Dangerous Confrontations. Jason was the first to notice it, the bloodstains on Roman's scarf. They weren't large, but they were fresh. The dark smudges starkly marred his expensive clothing, a jarring contrast to his otherwise polished appearance. My wolf, Mason, stirred uneasily within me. The air around Roman crackled with raw alpha power, electric and suffocating. It was like staring into the eye of a furious storm. His cold, ice-blue eyes fixed on me, and I could feel the weight of his lethal intent. His voice was quiet, yet it pierced the air like a blade. "Are you here to harass my mate again?" His mate. The word hit like a blow, yet I tried to stand my ground, clenching my fists to keep from faltering. "I have questions for Scarlett," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Roman's expression didn't waver, but there was a glint of something even darker in his eyes. With deliberate steps, he closed the distance between us. Despite my years as an alpha, I found myself instinctively stepping back. The blood and the scent of potent moonshine whiskey emanating from him were disorienting. His proximity intensified the suffocating power of his alpha dominance, and I could swear there was a faint silver gleam flickering in those icy eyes. Before I could utter another word, his hand shot out like a strike of lightning. His grip latched onto my throat, and suddenly I was airborne, slammed against the thick wooden post of the villa's porch. Jason yelled out in alarm, his wolf growling in protest. "Stop!" Roman's grip on my throat tightened with terrifying precision. His strength was overwhelming, sharper and heavier than any alpha I had ever encountered. "You've crossed the line too many times," he said, his voice calm. Too calm. "First, you humiliated her. Then, you pursued her even after she wanted nothing to do with you. Now, you dare approach our villa and disrupt my mate's peace?" I couldn't breathe. My hand clawed at his wrist, but it was fruitless. My wolf, Mason, howled in my mind, desperately trying to lend me the strength to fight back, but it was no use. Roman didn't just have raw physical power. His alpha aura alone rendered my wolf's strength almost non-existent. Jason rushed forward, grabbing Roman's wrist. "Please! It's a misunderstanding," he shouted, his voice frantic. "He doesn't mean her any harm." Roman turned his frigid gaze to Jason. The weight of his killing intent intensified, making Jason visibly stagger in fear. "Misunderstanding?" Roman repeated with chilling disbelief. I knew what was coming. This wasn't a warning or a scare tactic. He meant to kill me. I forced out a hoarse whisper, each word scraping against my tightening throat. "Misunderstanding. Yes, please." Roman's expression didn't soften. In fact, there was something more brutal in the depths of those silver-tinged eyes. His grip continued to tighten, and the edges of my vision began to darken. My pride was stripped away, replaced by a raw, primal fear that I had never experienced before. "Roman," Eric's voice cut through the haze of suffocating power. "Perhaps this isn't the time or place. There are pending matters to discuss." "Matters?" Roman replied without turning. His voice grew colder. "Do you think the Amber Pack holds any significance?" That made Jason flinch. But for me, the truth in those words stung more than the pressure on my throat. Roman's disdain for the Amber Pack was evident. Even worse, it was justified. "The negotiations," Eric pressed, "they're still incomplete. James Amber's influence." Roman's grip eased slightly, just enough for me to suck in a ragged breath. "Insignificant," Roman snapped again, but this time his voice was laced with irritation rather than imminent death. Eric didn't back down. "Be that as it may, delaying this may be more advantageous. I urge you, Roman." For a long, tense moment, Roman didn't move. Then, abruptly, he released me. I crumpled to the ground, gasping for air, my pride shattered. Roman adjusted his jacket sleeves meticulously, as though the encounter had been nothing more than swatting a fly. He stooped slightly, his face inches from mine, and said in a deadly whisper, "Approach my mate again, and this won't end with mercy." Jason scrambled to my side, helping me up as Roman turned and strode back to the villa. His movements were calm but brimming with dominance. Eric lingered for a moment, patting my shoulder with feigned sympathy. A word of advice: tread carefully next time. Then, without another glance, he followed Roman inside. Jason's hands trembled slightly as he steadied me. "Alpha?" he murmured, worried but hesitant to speak further. I clenched my fists, the humiliation burning hotter than the pain in my throat. I underestimated him. I growled, the rage in my voice barely covering the tremor of fear beneath it. But as much as I hated Roman in this moment, I couldn't deny the overwhelming truth. He was untouchable. And Scarlet was no longer mine to reach. The tension in the air was palpable as Roman slammed the villa door behind him. The force of it nearly knocked me off balance. Eric and I exchanged a quick glance. "What now?" Eric whispered. "Do we ensure he doesn't kill anyone else tonight?" "He's not in the mood for company," I muttered, hesitant to follow. The faint scent of blood and something else lingered around him. It wasn't just the whiskey. I couldn't place it immediately, but there was a subtle edge to his aura tonight, an unrest that didn't sit right. "I'm calling Aiden," Eric stated firmly. "That wasn't just anger. Did you notice the heat radiating off him?" "A fever?" I asked, though it was a poor attempt to conceal the unease building in my gut. "No," Eric replied grimly. "It's something else." He hesitated for a moment, then added with a curse. "He's been drugged, an aphrodisiac, and a powerful one at that. Whoever did this knew what they were doing." I froze. "Roman? Drugged? That was unthinkable." "You're sure?" My voice trailed off as realization sank in. Eric didn't bother responding, his sharp expression making it clear he wasn't guessing. As he walked toward the villa's entrance, he tossed me one last warning. "Get Aiden here. Immediately. Whatever you do, keep Scarlet out of harm's way." I frowned, unsure of the implications, but Eric's urgency left no room for debate. Pulling out my phone, I dialed Aiden's number, praying we weren't already too late. Scarlet's POV. I woke to an unnerving sensation, like I was being watched. My wolf, Cora, stirred within me, restless and alert. I blinked groggily, my eyes adjusting to the dim light of the room. Roman was sitting by the bed, shoulders stiff and his gaze fixed on me. There was something intense, almost possessive in his eyes. "Roman?" I whispered, fully awake now. "What are you doing?" His expression didn't change. His stare felt heavier, more heated than usual. I sat up slowly, hoping to shake off the unease creeping up my spine. As I reached out to touch his forehead, his skin burned under my fingertips. "You're burning up. What happened?" The scent of blood and whiskey hit me then, strong, potent. The worry in my chest deepened. "Did you drink too much? Are you hurt?" I asked hurriedly, leaning closer to inspect him. But before I could do anything, he moved. His arm darted out, wrapping around my waist and pulling me down onto the bed. "Roman?" I yelped, startled by his uncharacteristic force. His weight pinned me as he leaned over, his face mere inches from mine. The heat radiating from his body was overwhelming. His breath ragged against my cheek. "Wait. Stop?" I stammered, struggling to push against him. "Something's not right. Let me call Aiden." He silenced me with a kiss. It wasn't gentle or controlled. It was hot, demanding, and utterly overpowering. The mate bond between us flared brightly, Cora howling in my head as his wolf aura crashed into mine. I should have resisted, but the intensity, the pull between us was too strong. Chapter 142, Forbidden Desires. Scarlet's. Roman's closeness overwhelmed me. His warmth seeped into every nerve in my body, igniting a storm I desperately tried to keep buried. My heart slammed against my ribs as he loomed over me, his breath hot against my skin. "Brother, stop," I managed to whisper, my voice shaking. My words meant nothing. His piercing ice-blue eyes burned with raw desire, a heat I'd never seen before. It wasn't the protective intensity I'd grown up with. This was something far more dangerous. His control, always so unshakable, had crumbled under the influence of the wine. "You don't want this," I whimpered, my hands pressed weakly against his chest in what felt like a futile attempt to create space. "The wine. It's not you. Please." But his hands found my jaw, angling my face. His touch was gentle, loving even, but it left no room for escape. "Do you think anything could make me want you less, little wolf?" he murmured deeply, his voice wrapped in a mix of need and conviction. My wolf Cora whined low in my mind, torn. Her instincts recognized her mate and yearned for him. Yet guilt tangled with that undeniable pull, the human part of me screaming this wasn't right. "Roman," I tried again, trembling against the sheer gravity of his presence. "You're not in control. You'll regret this." He chuckled, low and almost sinister. "I've never been more in control." His fingers trailed down my cheek, grazing my jawline and sending fire through my veins. Every protest on my lips vanished as my body betrayed me, arching toward him despite my mind's panicking cries. "This isn't." I tried again. My words dissolved into a hitched breath as he tilted my head with maddening tenderness. "You'll hate yourself when you remember." "I'll remember everything," he growled, his lips brushing my ear. His heat was almost unbearable, his alpha power rolling off him in waves. Every sound, every touch, every moment. My resolve cracked. The bond between us hummed stronger with every second, making my protest seem ridiculous, weak. "Little wolf," he said, his voice thick with sincerity and affection. "Behave." That endearing nickname, one he'd called me since I was a girl, struck my heart with devastating precision. He wasn't just the intimidating Shadow King or the Thornpack Alpha. He was my Roman, my protector, my impossible love. I shook my head, tears burning at the corners of my eyes. This isn't fair. Yet his lips descended on mine before I could utter another word. The kiss wasn't just passionate, it was consuming, leaving no space for anything but him. "Good girl," he murmured when I stopped struggling. The look in his eyes was one of pure worship, as if I was the center of his entire world. That gaze shattered me. It erased every barrier, every ounce of restraint I stubbornly clung to. Years of suppressed feelings surged to the surface, drowning out the guilt and leaving only him. My fingers curled into his shirt. "Roman? Mine," he growled, almost ferally. The declaration sent chills through me. When his lips claimed mine again with unrelenting passion, I didn't stop him. For the first time, I let go. I let myself fall into the whirlwind of all that he was. But morning came far too soon, and with it, a crushing sense of reality. I bolted upright in bed, clutching the blanket to my chest. My breathing was erratic as the night's events played on a loop in my head. The claiming marks on my skin were undeniable evidence of what had transpired. Panic gripped me like a vice, my hands trembling as they touched the faint marks at my neck and shoulders. "What have I done?" I whispered shakily, my voice almost breaking. My gaze fell on Roman's blood-stained scarf draped over the chair. The memory of its presence last night felt hazy, yet its reality hit like a punch to the gut. My stomach twisted with guilt. How could I have let this happen? He'd been drugged, not acting like himself. Sure, his words felt real, but what if they weren't? What if the wine had clouded his judgment? What if? The sharp sound of my phone ringing jolted me out of my thoughts. I scrambled for it, hoping it wasn't anyone who could sense the shame consuming me. "Aiden?" I croaked when I saw his name. "Scarlet." His voice was filled with urgency, on the verge of shouting. "Please tell me Roman's okay. Did you give him anything? Is he still passed out?" I froze, gripping the phone tighter. He's fine," I stammered, my mind racing for a believable answer. "I gave him an antidote." "What antidote?" Aiden demanded, his tone sharp with disbelief. "Someone tampered with his wine. Do you know what kind of dose it would take to affect him? What exactly did you give him?" "Just..." My voice faltered, my heart hammering. I couldn't let him dig too deep. "It was, in the medicine cabinet. There were some herbs I recognized." "Scarlet," Aiden interrupted, frustration clear in his tone. "This isn't the time to guess or experiment with his treatment. I'm coming to check on him. If that wine was as potent as I think..." "No," I blurted, rising from the bed so quickly my head spun. "I mean, it's really not necessary. He's recovering fine. He just needs rest." There was silence on the other end, then a low, skeptical hum. "I'm still coming. Better safe than sorry." As he hung up, panic grabbed me by the throat. I darted around the room, searching for any evidence of the night I desperately wished I could undo. My trembling fingers pulled the scarf from the chair, hastily wrapping it around my neck in an attempt to hide the claiming marks. The door opened abruptly. Aiden stepped inside, his gaze immediately scanning the room before landing on me. "What are you wearing?" He frowned, narrowing his eyes at the thick scarf wrapped awkwardly around my neck. "It's not that cold in here. I'm a little chilly," I mumbled, gripping the edges of the scarf tightly. Suspicion flashed across his face. It was subtle but unwavering. He stepped closer, his gaze scrutinizing every detail of my appearance. "Scarlet," he said slowly, his voice taking on the firm tone he used when treating stubborn patients. "Why do you look so pale? Did something happen in this room?" I froze, my mind blank as I tried to come up with an excuse. "No, it's just..." His healer's instincts couldn't be fooled. He reached for the scarf, his intention clear. "No!" I shouted, backing away quickly, clutching the fabric as though it were a lifeline. Aiden's eyebrows shot up, his surprise quickly replaced by concern. "Scarlet, if there's something wrong, now's the time to tell me." I shook my head, my thoughts a scrambled mess. "Roman, he just needed help recovering. The wine caught him off guard, that's all." Every word felt weak, hollow, like a threadbare lie struggling to hold together. Aiden's lips pressed into a thin line. "Whatever explanation you're giving doesn't make sense. I need to check you both." "I'm fine." I cut him off, my voice trembling. I trailed off, failing to come up with anything more convincing. Aiden's frown deepened, his gaze flickering to where Roman slept. His suspicion was palpable, but he held back from pressing further for now. I turned away quickly, my thoughts spiraling into chaos. If Aiden was already this suspicious, what would Roman say when he woke? The thought chilled me to the bone. Would he remember? And if he did, would he hate me? Would he think I'd taken advantage of him when he was vulnerable? I pressed a hand to my chest, trying to steady my breathing. I couldn't lose him. Not like this. Chapter 143, Dangerous Secrets, Scarlet's POV. Aiden reached for the scarf around my neck, his brows pulled together in clear concern. "Scarlet, I need to check your neck." I slapped his hand away before he could finish the sentence. "What are you doing?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. My heart thundered in my chest, and Cora growled uneasily in my mind. Aiden blinked, startled. Then his usually bright expression turned serious. "I think it's a medical necessity. Roman's drugging could involve more than just him. Inappropriate." I cut him off abruptly, trying to keep my composure. My hand clutched the scarf tighter against my skin. "You touching me unnecessarily is certainly inappropriate. Should I call Roman and tell him about this invasion of my personal space?" That worked. Aiden's face flickered with hesitation, and he put his hands up in mock surrender. All right. No need for threats." His voice carried forced cheerfulness, but I didn't miss the sharpness beneath. I crossed my arms. "Then instead of badgering me, why don't you go check on Roman? He's upstairs and he needs attention more than I do." My words sounded firm, but I could feel the nervous tremor hiding behind them. Aiden's gray eyes lingered on me for a second too long, as if he were trying to put together pieces of a puzzle only he could see. Finally, he sighed, giving a small shrug. "Fine, I'll go up and see how our Alpha King is faring. He gestured at me with a casual wave, "get some rest." I turned away before he could read my expression any further. My wolf Cora was pacing incessantly, her unease echoing my own. Outwardly calm, I watched Aiden head up the stairs, but inwardly I was bracing myself. His knowing look lingered in my mind, sharp as a needle. Third-person needle. Aiden climbed the staircase, every step feeling heavier with suspicion. When he reached Roman's room, the faint smell of cigarette smoke greeted him. Roman sat on the edge of the bed, his silhouette sharp against the moonlight streaming in through the windows. A cigarette burned between his fingers, the smoke curling lazily in the air. His robe hung loosely on his broad shoulders, exposing deep, angry scratches clawed across his chest. Aiden froze, his eyes darting from the marks to Roman's unusually pale complexion. Something didn't sit right. "Roman," Aiden started cautiously. "How are you feeling?" Roman turned his head slightly to glance at Aiden. His ice-blue eyes seemed cloudier than usual, though his expression betrayed nothing. "Weak," he said simply. He took another drag from the cigarette, his fingers steady despite what he'd just admitted. It wasn't the word itself, but the way Roman said it, calm and matter-of-fact, that put Aiden on edge. "Define weak. Is it physical? Mental? The drug you were exposed to?" "Both," Roman cut in, finally exhaling the smoke in a low, measured breath. His free hand tapped against his knee in thought. "The effects linger, more than they should." Aiden's gaze darted back to the claw marks. They were deep enough to leave faint traces of blood around the edges, yet Roman was making no attempt to cover or address them. Before he could stop himself, Aiden blurted, "The scratches?" Roman didn't so much as flinch. His gaze didn't waver. "What about them?" Aiden took a step closer, his healer instincts kicking in. "Do you remember how you got them?" Because he paused, the pieces starting to slot together in his mind. Scarlet's flustered behavior, her tight grip on the scarf, Roman's condition, the marks, a tiny flicker of something, realization perhaps, crossed Aiden's features, though he quickly smoothed it over. "Never mind," he muttered. "Any dizziness?" Roman turned back to stare out the window. Nothing I can't handle. Your concern is appreciated. Dismissed. Aiden hesitated at first, but then nodded, taking the dismissal for what it was. As he headed toward the door, though, he cast one last glance at the claw marks. His lips twitched as if he wanted to say something but thought better of it. "I'll check in later," he said finally, before leaving the room. Scarlett's POV. I was pacing downstairs when Aiden emerged. My anxiety spiked again when I saw his hesitant expression. "How is he?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Aiden's eyes landed on me like a weight. His knowing stare sent a chill down my spine. "Well, he's alive. That's the good news," he said with a hint of sarcasm. "The bad news is the drug's effects are sticking around longer than expected." I hated the way he was looking at me, like he knew something I didn't want him to know. My panic bubbled up again, and I snapped. "If you're done, you can leave now. He doesn't need you hovering over him all night." He raised an eyebrow. "Scarlett, I'm a healer. This is what I do." Then his gaze flickered to the scarf around my neck. "And just to clarify, you're sure you're feeling all right?" My blood ran cold. "I'm fine," I said quickly. Too quickly. "Just tired. Roman's stable now, isn't he? So there's no need for you to linger here." Aiden opened his mouth like he was about to say something, but Roman's voice cut through the tension from the top of the stairs. "She said leave." I whipped around to see Roman standing there, his ice-blue eyes locked onto Aiden with a deadly calm expression. Aiden held up his hands again in mock surrender. "No need to tell me twice." He turned and left, but not before casting a pointed glance at me. Once the door closed behind him, I finally let out the breath I didn't realize I was holding. Roman descended the stairs slowly, each step deliberate. He didn't say a word, but gestured for me to follow him back upstairs. My heart raced as I climbed the steps behind him, each one heavier than the last. When we reached his room, he turned to face me fully. "How are you holding up?" I asked, breaking the silence. My voice felt too loud in the quiet room. Roman's gaze pinned me in place. "Come here." I hesitated. "Scarlett," he said, his voice firm. Unable to resist the alpha power laced in his tone, I stepped closer. My hands fidgeted nervously as I repeated, "Are you feeling all right?" Suddenly, Roman grabbed my wrist and pulled me toward him. "Explain this," he said, shrugging the robe off one shoulder to reveal the deep claw marks once more. I stared at them in horror, my mind scrambling for an excuse. "You might have fallen? Or—" "Scarlett." His voice was low and dangerous. "Try again." The intensity in his ice-blue eyes made it impossible for me to lie convincingly. I floundered. "Maybe you." Roman raised an eyebrow. "And how exactly does falling explain these? Do you think I won't recognize scars from claws? Your claws, little wolf?" I looked away, feeling trapped. He sighed and pulled me closer. "How did I end up in your room last night?" I felt my stomach drop. His tone was steady, but the weight of his words threatened to crush me. I didn't know what to say. Had the drug truly erased his memory of our night together? I swallowed hard, willing myself to answer, but no words came. Chapter 144, A Night of Close Calls. Relief swept over me as Roman's sharp eyes seemed to reflect confusion rather than recognition. It was clear, he didn't remember the events of the night. That knowledge should have brought me peace, but Cora, my wolf, paced nervously within me. Something unpredictable always followed when Roman lingered this way. Then his gaze landed on my neck, on the scarf. "Why are you wearing that?" His voice was calm, but the weight of his curiosity hit me like a physical force. He reached out for the fabric. My stomach twisted, panic flared. I automatically jerked back, my hand tightening around the scarf's edge. "Don't!" I exclaimed, heart pounding like a drum inside my chest. "I'm cold, that's all." Cora whimpered faintly, sensing my unease. My fingers clutched the material desperately, as if it could shield me from his piercing gaze. Roman studied me, those ice-blue eyes narrowing. He didn't say anything at first, but his silence was worse than words. The weight of his stare could unravel me. "You should go back to your room," I said finally, my voice trembling just slightly. I tried to smile. Casual. Calm. Anything to mask what I really wanted. For him to go so I could bury my shame deep where it couldn't be unearthed. "It's late." He tilted his head, watching me with that same deep focus that always made me feel as though he could see through my every defense. "You seem very anxious," he said, his voice soft but probing. I felt my whole body tense. His words struck a little too close to the truth. I'm not anxious, I snapped defensively, tugging the scarf higher around my neck. Shouldn't we be sleeping at this hour? That familiar, amused glint sparked in his eyes. I hated and loved it all at once. It was the look he always gave me when he thought I was hiding something. You should be sleeping, little wolf, he murmured, but the way he lingered, I could tell he wasn't convinced I was fine. Exactly, I said quickly. We both should. So, good night. A long pause stretched between us. It stretched too long, making my nerves fray with each passing second. Finally, he gave a slow nod. Very well. The relief that flooded me was instant. I dared to believe it was over as he moved toward the door. But then he suddenly stopped. My heart jumped as he turned back. His movements were slow, deliberate, and before I understood what was happening, he was standing close. Too close. His hands framed my face, cupping it gently. Every nerve in my body froze under his touch. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but no words came. And then he leaned down, his face inches from mine. My breath caught in my throat as my traitorous eyes fluttered shut. I expected his lips. My mind screamed to prepare for the intensity of another kiss. But he only brushed his lips against my forehead in a tender gesture. The chaste, innocent touch sent an entirely new wave of shivers down my spine. Why close your eyes? His low chuckle broke through the air. The teasing tone made my face instantly burn with heat. I pulled back, stumbling over my words. I'm tired, that's all. I clutched at the scarf desperately, hoping it shielded my obvious embarrassment. He just looked at me for another moment, a knowing smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Without another word, he finally left. The moment I heard the door click closed, my legs gave out beneath me and I collapsed onto the bed. My chest heaved, trying to steady itself, but the pounding in my heart refused to ease. Had I successfully fooled him? For now, maybe. But Roman wasn't stupid, and I couldn't keep this up forever. He'd figure it out eventually. The sheets clinging to me carried his scent. It mingled with the faintest evidence of our night together, and I found it unbearable. My fingers gripped the fabric hard as I fought to ignore the ghosts of his touch. I couldn't let myself think about it. Not the way he'd held me, or the heat of his kisses. Not the marks I could still feel on my skin, hidden beneath the scarf. My stomach churned as I forced myself to sit up. This wasn't the time to fall apart. Evidence needed to be dealt with. My legs ached as I stood, every step reminding me of last night in ways that made my face heat. But I pushed through it, focusing on removing every trace of what had happened. Inside the bathroom, I spotted his scarf, the one I'd hastily hidden earlier. The bloodstain stood stark against the posh fabric. My chest tightened as I picked it up, my hands shaking slightly. And then there was a knock at the door. Scarlet? Roman's voice sent my heart plummeting to the floor. My shower's not working. May I use yours? Panic slammed into me like a tidal wave. I shoved the scarf out of sight, barely registering the words coming out of my own mouth. Gee, just a moment. I ran frantic eyes over the bathroom, searching for anything else I might have missed. When I was certain nothing incriminating was left, I approached the door, forcing a steady breath. When I opened it, Roman's gaze once again dropped to my neck. Still cold? He asked casually, though something in his tone made cold sweat bead along my spine. He stepped inside as if he owned the space, and his gaze lingered. There was amusement there, a small but clear challenge in those ice-blue eyes. Yes, very cold, I stammered. My fingers automatically adjusted the scarf as though that could shield me further. Roman stepped closer, closing the distance between us in one languid stride. His hand lifted toward the scarf again, this time slower, almost teasing. I twisted away before he could grab it. I told you, I'm fine. The glint in his eyes sharpened. Are you sure it's not an injury? No, I exclaimed, maybe too quickly. My chest felt tight with the effort of keeping my panic contained. No injury, just chillier than usual, that's all. He tilted his head slightly, his gaze thoughtful and yet unyielding. He didn't press further. Instead, he moved into the bathroom and shut the door without another word. I willed my heart to stop racing. The sound of the running shower filled the room. I sank onto the edge of the bed, gripping the covers tightly. My mind spun with every possible outcome. How long could I keep a scarf around my neck without rousing suspicion? Would anyone believe me if they saw the marks? What would Roman say if I pinched my eyes shut, trying to push the thoughts away. The only certainty I had was that I couldn't let both Roman and Aiden figure it out. The shower shut off suddenly, snapping me out of my spiraling thoughts. Before I could fully process the change, Roman's voice cut through the tension. "Little wolf." His voice was calm, yet laced with an unspoken edge. I turned just in time to see him step out of the bathroom, a towel draped lazily over his shoulders. Something in his hand caught the light. And then my heart stopped. "What is this?" He was holding the scarf, the very scarf I'd fought so hard to conceal. Its bloodstains were now fully exposed under the dim light. My body went stiff. Every breath vanished from my lungs as I stared at the damning evidence dangling from his grip. My mind raced to come up with an excuse, but no words formed. Roman's ice-blue eyes locked onto mine, heavy with both curiosity and something far more dangerous. And in that moment, I knew. My secret was about to come unraveled. Chapter 145, Dangerous Revelations. Roman's ice-blue eyes locked onto the scarf in his hand, his attention drawn to the bloodstain, his brow furrowed, his confusion evident as he studied it closely. Then his gaze moved from the scarf to me. It lingered long enough to make my chest tighten painfully. He frowned. "What's this?" His voice was calm, but it carried weight. A weight I wasn't ready for. My heart jolted, a rush of panic flooding through me. Cora, my wolf, stirred erratically beneath my skin, mirroring my feelings of dread. I couldn't let him dig deeper. I quickly scrambled for an explanation as my mind raced desperately. "It's nothing," I said too quickly. The words burst from my lips. "It's just, I had a nosebleed earlier. That's all." Roman raised an eyebrow, his fingers tightening slightly on the edge of the scarf. His skeptical gaze bore into mine, as if he could strip away every lie with just a single look. "A nosebleed?" His voice was sharper now, disbelief shining through. He stepped closer. Too close. His towering form loomed over me, making me feel small and cornered. He crouched slightly, lowering himself to my level, as if trying to make me speak the truth. "Yes, a nosebleed," I said quickly, my hands clutching the blanket over me like a shield. "It got on the scarf when I was helping you earlier." For a long moment he said nothing, his silence pressing heavily into the room. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing loudly. Cora was no help, whining nervously in the back of my mind, her ears pinned back. Roman's icy gaze flicked back to the scarf. Slowly, methodically, he brought it closer for inspection, his thumb rubbing against the fabric as if to test the texture of the dried blood. His fingers were suddenly under my chin, tilting my face upward. I gasped softly, startled by the tender yet firm touch. "Was it bad?" he asked, his voice deceptively soft now. I blinked, confused. He pinched my nose lightly between his thumb and forefinger, his action startlingly clinical. "What are you?" "You said it was a nosebleed." His movements were precise, his frown deepening. "There's no lingering sign of one, and I would have noticed blood earlier." "It stopped already," I snapped, jerking my head back to free myself from his hold. I handled everything." Roman's eyes narrowed. He straightened, his imposing presence even more daunting as he crossed his arms over his chest and towered above me. "You're lying, little wolf," he murmured, the sharpness in his voice cutting through me. "I'm not." My tone came out more defensive than I intended. Roman didn't flinch, his gaze calculating. He tilted his head slightly, studying me as his lips pursed in thought. It felt as though he were dissecting every movement and word, trying to unravel the mystery I desperately tried to keep hidden. I shifted uncomfortably under his intense silence. The scrutiny was unbearable. "Let it go, Roman," I said finally, my voice low and almost pleading. "I'm exhausted. I just want to sleep." I turned my head, pulling the covers up and burying my face into them. It was all I could do to create a barrier between us. But my sudden movement caused the scarf around my neck to slip. It slid just enough to reveal what I had been so desperately hiding. The claiming marks. Roman's gaze immediately snapped to the marks on my neck. His hand reached forward before I could react, lightly brushing the scarf aside to expose more. I stiffened beneath his touch. My pulse raced as his ice-blue eyes darkened, his strength rippling through the mate bond like a shockwave. "What happened here?" His tone was low, almost quiet now. The calmness made it even more dangerous. My heart felt like it stopped. I couldn't breathe. Cora howled faintly in my mind, her instincts torn between submission and defense. My voice cracked under the weight of his gaze. Every nerve in my body screamed for me to come up with something, anything to explain what couldn't be explained. I placed my hands on my neck, trying to shield the marks from his view. "Scarlet?" His voice softened, but it was no less commanding. His hand gently brushed mine aside, his fingers tracing one of the marks lightly. "Do you?" His words were slow, heavy, like he was processing something too big to grasp all at once. "Do you know what these are?" My shoulders tensed so hard it felt like every muscle in my body locked up. "Roman," I rasped, suppressing the tremble in my voice. Would you forgive me if I did something wrong?" He didn't answer. His icy blue eyes stayed fixed on the marks, his thumb resting against one lightly. "That depends," he said finally, his tone a fraction softer. "What exactly did you do?" I swallowed hard. Every instinct in me screamed to run, to escape. But there was no escape, not from him, not now. Instead, I tried to deflect, to buy time. "I said I'm tired," I whispered, trying to retreat further into the safety of the blanket. "I don't want to talk tonight." But Roman wasn't letting me go. He leaned closer, his breath warm on my skin. "Stop evading," he said quietly, his intensity growing. "What are these marks, Scarlet?" I clenched my fists beneath the blanket, my body trembling slightly. "I told you," I exclaimed, my voice cracking. "I tripped, and I fell." Roman exhaled slowly, his disbelief clear. "A fall," he repeated, his voice sharp with sarcasm. "Do you think I'm a fool?" My lips trembled, my chest felt heavy. Every second he stared made it harder to keep unraveling lies. Just as I felt the walls closing in, his phone vibrated in his pocket. I felt the tension shift instantly. Roman's hand moved from my neck to pull out the phone, his brows furrowing as he glanced at the screen. "It's Hunter," he muttered, his eyes flicking back toward me briefly. I nodded quickly, urging him with my eyes to take the call. "You should pick up," I said, nearly breathless. He hesitated, lingering just long enough to remind me this conversation wasn't over. Then he turned, taking steps toward the door as he answered. "Speak." His voice was curt as he addressed Hunter on the other line. I let out a shaky breath, collapsing back against the bed as relief momentarily washed over me. But it was short-lived. Roman's conversation was brief and clipped. Whatever Hunter said darkened his expression instantly. When he returned, his features were hard. He didn't look at me right away, his movements rigid as he pocketed his phone. "Go to sleep," he finally said simply, his tone betraying none of his earlier anger or confusion. I wasted no time. I burrowed under the covers, pulling them tight around me like a protective cocoon. Cora whimpered anxiously, but I forced her quiet. I couldn't think about anything else right now. Not the marks, not Roman, not the interrogation I barely escaped. Even so, I felt his presence linger as he moved closer. His shadow loomed over me, but his stern expression finally melted. He adjusted the blanket around me, his hand brushing against my shoulder briefly. "Don't sleep on your stomach. You'll make the marks worse." His voice carried a hint of frustration, but not the searing anger I expected. I swallowed, huddling deeper into my blanket, hoping he wouldn't notice my trembling. To my relief, he moved back toward the door. But just as his hand gripped the handle, I acted on impulse. "Roman." My voice was shaky yet firm. He turned, his gaze immediately locking on mine. I swallowed hard, gathering the courage to speak. Is accepting another alpha's mark really unforgivable?" My words came out in a rush before I could stop myself. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in the depths of those ice-blue eyes. The weight of my unspoken question hung in the air. Would it be unforgivable if the mark was yours? Chapter 146, Dangerous Confessions. Hunter's call broke the suffocating tension like a sharp blade cutting through silence. Roman stood tall, his figure imposing as his icy blue gaze moved from the scarf in his hand to his ringing phone. The scarf's bloodstains were stark in the dim light, the silence between us too heavy to bear. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding so loudly it vibrated in my ears. My breath hitched as he brought the ringing phone to his ear. But he didn't answer right away. "Answer it," I said hastily, my voice trembling as I clutched the blanket to my chest. My fingers tightened around the fabric like a shield. It might be important. Roman tilted his head slightly, his sharp gaze lingering on me for a moment too long. My skin burned under the weight of it. Then, finally, his lips pressed into a thin line, and he shifted his focus back to the phone. "They speak," he barked into the receiver, his tone clipped, giving whoever was on the other end no room to hesitate. I exhaled shakily, relief fleeting. His presence still filled every corner of the room, heavy and overwhelming. Yet just as he turned toward the door, preparing to leave, he stopped. I froze. Roman turned back, his expression softening, just barely. His steps were deliberate as he moved toward me, the tension in the room thickening with each step. Before I could process what was happening, he leaned down, pressing a feather-light kiss to my forehead that sent ripples through my body. "Rest," he murmured, the softness in his voice unfamiliar, almost disarming. I blinked up at him, stunned and unsure of what to say. My lips parted, but words failed me as he turned again toward the door, his movements unhurried. He was leaving. Why? An ache spread through my chest, sharp and suffocating. The words bubbled up before I could stop them. "Roman, wait!" My voice wavered, catching mid-breath, but it was loud enough to stop him in his tracks. Roman froze, hand on the doorknob. I could see the way his shoulders tensed as his head tilted slightly to the side. "What is it?" he asked in his low, calm voice. The words I wanted to say stuck in my throat. My hands clutched the blanket tighter, but my chest felt like it was going to burst. "Last night," I began, pausing to gather my thoughts, my heart thundering painfully in my chest. "We were intimate." The room fell into complete silence. Roman didn't move for what felt like eternity. His hand stayed on the doorknob, frozen mid-motion. Slowly his head turned, and he looked over his shoulder at me. There wasn't anger or shock in his expression. His icy blue eyes, piercing as ever, studied me intently. For a moment I wanted to hide, to take the words back, but the ache in my chest wouldn't let me. No more hiding. Those years in the Eastern Territories haunted me. Every whispered statement, every expectation from the pack that he would choose someone else as his Luna, they were bricks in the wall that separated us. Even now, my hands trembled as I clutched the blanket tighter. I was terrified. Terrified he would dismiss me. Terrified my feelings would mean nothing to him. Terrified of what came next. "I can't pretend anymore, Roman," I said in a small voice, barely more than a whisper. "I don't want to keep acting like we're just... I couldn't bring myself to finish. Roman turned completely, his movements slow and deliberate, his unwavering gaze locked with mine, and I felt completely bare under his scrutiny. "I don't want to be just siblings," I finally blurted, tears threatening to spill from my eyes. I hated how weak my voice sounded, but the dam had broken, and my feelings were rushing out uncontrollably. "I've loved you for so long, and it hurts. It hurts to hide it. It hurts to pretend like I don't care." Tears blurred my vision. Cora, my wolf, whimpered anxiously in my mind, her own longing tangled with mine. Roman moved, closing the distance between us in a few determined strides. His nearness made it hard to breathe, his alpha presence pressing down on me like a wave. "Are you angry?" I asked through shaky breaths, desperate for him to speak, to say anything. "But you were the one who..." My voice cracked and I pointedly looked away. "I didn't seduce you." Before I could finish, his hands gripped my face, tilting my head up. His lips crushed down on mine with an intensity that stole the air from my lungs. The kiss was fiery, consuming, and unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It wasn't sweet or gentle. It was possessive and overwhelming, a declaration as strong as any words spoken aloud. The mate bond between us roared to life, and every doubt, every hesitation I held had no chance against its pull. When he pulled back, I was left breathless, my cheeks flushed and my world spinning. Roman rested his forehead against mine, his breath warm against my skin. The moment hung heavy between us, unspoken yet understood. "Are you saying I forced you?" he asked in a rough whisper, the words sending a shiver down my spine. I blinked up at him, dazed and unsure how to answer. My lips parted, but my voice barely came out. Finally, I nodded. He drew back slightly, his sharp gaze locking onto mine. "So, little wolf," he began, his tone laced with something unreadable, "what do you plan to do about it?" His question sent a fresh wave of frustration through me. My lip trembled as tears began welling up again. "This is something you should take responsibility for," I exclaimed, my voice breaking with emotion. "What do you think we should do, Roman?" My words tumbled out, spilling over years of suppressed feelings, every moment I'd been forced to pretend, every room I left to avoid seeing him with someone else, Every stolen glance, every aching night of loneliness, it all came rushing back. Roman's expression shifted, his icy blue eyes softening with an emotion I couldn't place. He reached up, cupping my cheek in his warm hand. "Don't cry," he murmured, his thumb brushing away a fresh tear that trailed down my skin. But I couldn't stop crying. The overwhelming emotions were too much. All the fear, anger, and longing refused to be held back anymore. Every suppressed feeling came spilling out in hiccuping sobs. "Take responsibility," I demanded again, my voice cracking as I grabbed at his shirt like a lifeline. He leaned in closer, nodding as his lips brushed against my forehead in a gesture so soft it made my heart ache. "All right," he said simply. The calm assurance in his voice sent relief flooding through me. But then he smirked, his expression lightening with amusement. "You're such a hopeless mess, little wolf," he teased, though his voice held warmth instead of malice. I swatted at his shoulder weakly, my breath still coming in uneven gasps. "That's your fault, too," I snapped, though my words lacked any real bite. His chuckle rumbled through his chest as he gently pinched my cheek. "You're blaming me for everything now, are you?" But before either of us could say another word, Hunter's persistent call interrupted once more. Roman flashed an annoyed glance at the phone vibrating in his pocket, sighing in frustration as he leaned back. "I have to deal with this," he said, his tone apologetic but firm. His hand reached out to brush a stray strand of hair from my face before cupping my cheek again. "Sleep," he said softly. "We'll talk later." Still sniffling, I reluctantly nodded, letting him rise to his feet. Just as he reached the door, a thought struck me, and I grabbed at his sleeve before he could leave. "The blood," I said quickly, staring up at him with wide, worried eyes. "Is it dangerous?" Roman paused, glancing back down at me. The faintest flicker of something crossed his face, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "Don't worry about it," he reassured me, his voice steady and calm. I hesitated, my grip on his shirt tightening for just a moment before I let him go. He offered me one last lingering glance, his gaze softening as he took a step away. And then he was gone, the door closing quietly behind him. I lay back against the bed, my heart still racing as the events of the night replayed in my mind. What did he mean by taking responsibility? Was it possible he would truly claim me as his mate? The questions swirled in my mind, both terrifying and exciting. My fingers brushed against my claiming marks, and for the first time, I wasn't overcome with fear or shame. As I drifted off to sleep, Roman's scent lingered faintly in the room, as if keeping watch over me. The snow fell heavily outside, blanketing the world in quiet stillness. For the first time in years, I let myself dream of possibilities, of a future I'd never dared to consider. It wasn't until Emma's call late the next morning that I was pulled back to reality. Chapter 147, Fever Dreams. Emma's voice buzzed through the phone like an electric current, her words full of venomous delight. "They didn't just leave, Scarlett," Emma said, clearly relishing the news. "Sarah and Grace were removed, as in, dragged out like common rogues. Can you believe that?" I sat up straighter in bed, my head pounding as I gripped the phone tighter. Something about her tone gave me pause, but Emma didn't allow for interruptions. "The den staff said Grace's treatment was discontinued effective immediately," Emma continued, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "And they didn't look exactly friendly while informing them. Oh, the disrespect! Imagine the Winter Luna and her precious daughter being thrown out onto the street like that." She laughed, the sound light and almost cruel in its cheerfulness. "I wonder how they're holding up now? Probably licking their wounds somewhere and planning their next move. I doubt Grace is smart enough to figure out what to do next, though." I frowned, my annoyance prickling at Emma's glee. She rarely exaggerated, but it didn't sit right. Grace's ties to the Winters, not to mention Alexander and the Amber family, were strong. This wasn't something done lightly. "What exactly did they say?" I asked flatly, cutting into Emma's narrative with a tone that demanded specifics. "Who cares what they said?" Emma replied, still giddy. "The important part is that they're out. No more den for dear frail Grace. Not that it'll matter soon, with the pack's resources gone and her health like that." She trailed off, suppressing what sounded like a chuckle. My frown deepened. "Emma," I said more firmly this time, "details." Well, all right, Emma sighed, though her tone still held that faint trace of amusement. The den claimed her condition required more specialized care than they could provide. That's the official line, but let's be real. Someone high up must have pulled the strings. Maybe it was you with a little nudge to the shadow organization? Her voice turned teasing at the end, but there was sharp curiosity beneath it. It wasn't me, I said firmly, though Emma's insinuation planted a seed of suspicion in my mind. If it wasn't me who orchestrated this. I shook the thought away. Grace wouldn't stop her own treatment. Someone must have interfered. The laugh on the other end of the phone abruptly cut off. There was silence, only for it to be replaced by an entirely different voice. Alexander, you conniving liar. His voice boomed through the receiver, hot and accusatory. My muscles tensed immediately. Alexander, I said coolly, unwilling to rise to his bait. How dare you? His words came fast and sharp, leaving no room for pleasantries. You've gone too far this time, Scarlett. Do you think you're untouchable because of Roman? Or is this some sort of pathetic revenge scheme against Grace? I felt my grip tighten around the phone. I have no idea what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, Alexander thundered. You had Grace thrown out of the healing den like she was trash. Do you even realize the consequences of what you've done? This isn't just about her. It's about pack stability. You could have jeopardized... Oh, spare me the speech, I snapped, no longer able to hold my tongue. I didn't do anything to Grace. Are you losing your mind, or are you just blind enough not to see the bigger picture? Look at your pack's condition, Alexander. At what Grace and her lies have cost everyone, and now it's my fault she's being held accountable? She didn't deserve that treatment, he countered. She's ill. And how convenient is that? I shot back, my voice rising alongside my frustration. Ill enough to pull your strings, ill enough to turn every glance away from what she's done. Don't lecture me about power plays, Alexander. Your fiancé is a master at them. His growl came low and dangerous. You would drag her through the dirt, wouldn't you? All because she didn't let you take her place. Is that what this is about? Jealousy? The sheer audacity of his words made my blood boil. I smiled bitterly, though he couldn't see it through the phone. That's rich, coming from you, the alpha who tried to sabotage my healing center to protect his precious Grace. Don't act like you're taking the moral high ground here, Alexander. She's your sister, he roared back. By blood, Scarlett. Silence fell between us for a moment, save for the sound of both our labored breathing. That's where you're wrong, Alexander, I said finally, my voice quieter but colder than ice. Grace is nothing to me. Not anymore. Your pack's downfall? That isn't on me. Take a hard look at who you tied yourself to. And without waiting for his reply, I ended the call. My heart raced. The room felt stifling, and my frustrations churned in my chest like a storm. Alexander had always been insufferable, but this, accusing me outright? My only solace was the faint warmth of knowing Roman likely had a hand in Grace's humiliation, just like he'd always protected me before. The thought of him calmed me slightly, but that calm was short-lived. A wave of heat surged through my body, making me waver in place. My head swam suddenly, and a sharp pain tore through my leg as I tried to stand. My old injury, the persistent reminder of that rogue wolf attack from years ago, flared painfully. I gasped, collapsing onto the floor. The room spun. My memories blurred. I weakly reached out toward the water jug on my nightstand, but it felt miles away. Roman, I whispered, my voice barely audible. The fever clawed at me, pulling me into its grasp. A shadow crossed the room. Scarlett! A familiar scent enveloped me as strong arms lifted me. I whimpered, curling into his touch as the fog surrounding my mind thickened. Stay with me, Roman murmured, his voice tight with worry. I could feel the urgency radiating from him as he placed me carefully back on the bed. His hands brushed against my forehead, hot and trembling, before cursing softly under his breath. The sound was muffled as my consciousness faded in and out. She's feverish. Aiden, get here now. Roman's voice was distant as I lay engulfed by the suffocating heat of the fever. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. My head buzzed with Alexander's accusations, with Grace's scheming, with fragmented memories of last night, and with Roman's touch grounding me in the chaos. When Aiden arrived, he felt like a faint shadow in my feverish haze. His words blurred, but I registered snippets. Temperatures spiking, Her old injury, it's limiting circulation. A soft pressure landed on my hand. Roman, I realized through the fog. He was sitting by the bed, holding my hand firmly in his. Through my shallow breaths, I caught him murmuring something to Aiden. After that, the healer left the room quickly, muttering about giving them space. "Scarlet," Roman said gently but firmly, his tone demanding my attention. "Show me your leg." Even amidst the fever and exhaustion, I felt a flicker of mortified reluctance. My injury was old, ugly, something I'd always guarded fiercely, embarrassed by its reminders of my vulnerabilities. "Roman, it's fine," I mumbled weakly. "Scarlet," he said again, firmer this time. There was no room for argument. I closed my eyes, hesitating as I felt him shift closer. Whether it was the fever, the exhaustion, or the weight of everything that had happened, my defenses faltered. I couldn't fight him. Not now. Not when his hands, so steady and warm, offered the only anchor I had left in this storm. Chapter 148, Desperate Measures. I stood in the corridor of the healing den, gripping Emma's phone tightly, staring at Scarlett's number on the screen. My thumb hovered over the call button. I clicked it with force. This had to be the call she answered. It rang once, twice, a third time. Voicemail. I ground my teeth, heat rising to my face. Why wouldn't she pick up? My frustration boiled over, but I redialed her number again. It didn't even ring this time before going straight to voicemail. "Seriously, Alexander?" Emma's sharp voice cut through my thoughts. I looked up briefly, but she was already storming toward me, her arms crossed and her expression tight. "She's not going to answer. I don't know why you keep trying." Her words made me grit my teeth, but I ignored her, hitting redial again. I tried to focus on the sound of the ringing rather than her cold stare boring into me. If Scarlett had any decency, she'd answer and explain her actions. "It's hopeless," Emma snapped, snatching the phone from my hand before I could stop her. "You know she can sense your alpha scent through the call, right? That's why she's rejecting you. She knows it's you." I froze for a moment. Was that true? Of course Scarlett would recognize my scent, interwoven through the phone like a trail of my presence. I should have known. "That doesn't matter," I snapped, trying to cover the realization. "I need answers." Emma rolled her eyes, clutching her phone against her chest like I was some thief. "Oh, please. What you need is to stop acting like a desperate fool." She her head to the side, letting her words sting the air between us. "You think harassing her is going to change anything? She's done with you, Alexander. Forget it." "Watch your tone, Emma," I barked, my voice harder than I intended. Her words got under my skin, but I wouldn't let her see how deep. Emma didn't flinch. She stood tall, chin raised defiantly. "Watch my tone? How about you watch the mess your precious Grace has caused? Scarlett wouldn't be in this position if it weren't for her. And look at you now, going after Scarlett after all she's been through." "That's enough," I said harshly. Yet there was no conviction in my tone. My own anger felt fragile, as though it could at any second. Emma held my gaze for a second longer before waving her hand dismissively. "You're a lost cause," she said, turning on her heel and storming off. "Give me a call when you learn to think clearly. Or better yet, don't call at all." Her figure disappeared down the hall, leaving me standing there alone. Her words lingered uncomfortably in my mind, but I shoved them down, focusing on the chaos around me. Inside the healing den, Sarah was making no effort to hide her anger. The staff were clearly growing tired of her protests. The head healer was stern as she addressed my mother, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Miss Winter and the Luna need to leave now." "This discussion is over," the healer said with a sharp finality that caught even me off guard. I wouldn't let it stand. I sat frozen on the disheveled bed, my tears silently falling. My hands clutched tightly at the blanket around me like it was the only thing keeping me from falling apart completely. "Drag us out?" My voice wavered as I voiced the realization. "They're going to drag us out like rogues, Alexander?" The words felt hollow, almost unbelievable. This wasn't supposed to be happening. Not to me. Not to Mother. The door swung open, slamming against the wall with a resounding thud. I flinched, startled by the sudden entrance. Alexander strode in, his expression furious and dark. "Grace." His voice softened as he looked at me. He hurried to my side, cupping my face with warm, calloused hands. "It's okay. I'll fix this." I didn't look at him. My hands trembled as I gripped the blanket tighter, the humiliation clawing at me. How can you fix this? They've already decided, Alexander. His head turned sharply toward the door as the healer stepped into the room, standing with her arms crossed. I don't care who you are or what you say, the healer addressed Alexander without flinching. These are the orders. Treatment is done. You need to leave this facility. Alexander's jaw clenched so tightly that I thought he might snap. His voice was cold, cutting. Get out. Now. The healer didn't argue this time. She gave a small, curt nod and left, but the tension in the room remained suffocating. Jason! Alexander's voice boomed, and within seconds his beta appeared. Jason looked between us and stepped cautiously into the room. What are your instructions, Alpha? Fix this mess, Alexander barked. Find whoever ordered this and fix it. Jason's face twitched. There was hesitation in the way his eyes darted toward me, then to Alexander. He knew, just as I did, that this wasn't something easily resolved. Why is she doing this? I whispered, staring down at my trembling hands. My words cracked under the weight of my emotions. Why is Scarlett treating me this way? Both Alexander and Mother tensed at the mention of Scarlett's name. Third-person POV. Sarah paced, her movements sharp and erratic. Her breathing was uneven, fists tightening with every furious thought racing through her mind. Why? She demanded suddenly, spinning to face Alexander. How is Scarlett doing this? How has she gained this kind of power to move the Shadow Organization to act against us? This is more than petty vengeance. There's something we're missing here. Her eyes burned into Alexander, expecting an answer, but before he could make sense of Sarah's words, Grace's soft voice broke through the tense silence, trembling with trepidation. Maybe. Grace faltered, as though the words physically hurt her. Maybe she sold herself to them. Her pale shoulders trembled, and tears spilled anew. To bring me down, I should leave the pack. Maybe that would stop everything. Sarah turned on her sharply, disbelief and disgust flaring in her eyes. Don't you dare speak that nonsense, Grace. Her hand motioned to the room wildly. Do you think this is what she wants? For you to give up so easily? No. But I can't take it anymore, Grace whispered, her voice unsteady. She's my sister, and I don't want to see her ruin herself. Not like this. Stop talking. The words came low and deadly from Alexander. His voice cut through everything, sharp like the blade of an axe, silencing the room. He stepped forward, his eyes darker than they had been all day. Kat, there's something you should both know. His tone was calm, chillingly so. His gaze locked with Sarah's, and she could feel the weight of his words before he even said them. Scarlett didn't just gain power. She's been shaped by it. Alexander's jaw tightened, every word from his mouth deliberate. She grew up as Roman's sister in the Thorn Pack. Sarah froze mid-breath. Grace's lips parted, but no sound emerged. Her already pale face seemed to lose any remaining color. Scarlett, Sarah finally croaked, disbelief dripping from her words, is Roman's. The answer hung unspoken but undeniable in the tense air between them. Alexander's nod only fortified the reality none of them could comprehend. The blanket was my fortress, my refuge, and my shield. I burrowed deeper under it, pulling the soft fabric tighter around me. Scarlett, Roman's deep voice cut through my cocoon again. I squeezed my eyes shut, wishing he'd let me stay hidden forever. Come out from there. No. My voice was weak, muffled beneath the covers, but firm enough to hold my ground. Leave me alone. You're being a child. His footsteps moved toward the bed. I tensed. Go away. I gripped the blankets tighter. My fever left me feeling weak, but I wasn't going to let him win this easily. Roman sighed heavily. I'm not leaving, Scarlett. Show me your claiming marks. Now. I held the blanket tighter, curling up tighter beneath it. I couldn't let him see them, not with how raw they looked and how vulnerable they made me feel. You try taking these covers off, and I'll call Luna Catherine, I shot back. The threat seemed to stop him, or so I thought. Before I could push him further, I felt the entire blanket shift. Roman lifted me, cocooned and all, into his arms. My heart raced from the unexpected movement as I was deposited onto his lap. Let me go. I wriggled as best I could, but my protests only made him hum in amusement. With gentle care, he pulled back the covers, carefully uncovering just my face. Enough, he said firmly. The cold air hit my fevered cheeks, and I realized tears were gathering in my eyes from the sheer frustration of it all. Roman's gaze softened immediately. His strong brows drew together, and he cupped my flushed face in his large hand. "Are you in pain, little wolf?" His sudden kindness disarmed me entirely. The fight left my muscles, and I nodded, feeling utterly defeated. "Yes," I mumbled, my voice breaking slightly. Everything hurt, and I hated that I couldn't hide it from him. Chapter 149, Intimate Confessions. Roman's demand was so firm, so direct, that I had no choice but to reluctantly uncover my injury. I hated showing it, especially to him. But right now, I didn't seem to have a choice. His large hands were surprisingly gentle as he examined the bruising near my thigh, brushing his fingers lightly across the tender area. Sparks surged through the mate bond with every touch, causing my heart to race. "It's minor," he finally said, his tone softer now. "It'll heal quickly." I swallowed hard, pulling the blanket back around me as soon as he stepped back. "Good," I murmured, refusing to meet his gaze. "Now you can leave." I tried to sound firm, but the slight tremor in my voice betrayed me. The intensity of his attention made my skin tingle, and my already feverish state only made it worse. Instead of obeying my request, he chuckled, a deep, low sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Leave?" he repeated, amusement evident in his voice. "I don't think so." Before I could argue, he leaned forward, his hand effortlessly pulling the covers away from my face. I frantically reached out to grab them back, but froze when I felt his cool lips press against mine. I froze, completely stunned. The world seemed to stop at that moment. My fever burned hotter, but it wasn't entirely from the heat in my body. Roman's lips were firm yet soft, his kiss lingering enough to make my head spin. When he started to pull away, instinct, perhaps the mate bond, took over. My hand shot out, clutching the fabric of his shirt before I could stop myself. "Not enough?" he teased, his voice low and rich, filled with amusement. My face turned scarlet, which was quite a feat considering my fever-flushed cheeks. "Brother," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. But his familiar title felt so foreign, so wrong on my tongue after everything that had happened. "Are you sober?" I blurted out, desperate to clear my chaotic thoughts. "Do you even know what you're doing?" Roman's ice-blue eyes locked onto mine. For once, they weren't cold but warm, almost tender. He smiled faintly, the corners of his mouth lifting in that maddeningly calm way of his. "No traces of the drug," he said plainly. His certainty sent my heart plummeting into a wild rhythm. He knew exactly what he was doing. This was not a mistake, not a side effect of the aphrodisiac. He was utterly and completely aware. Memories of him pinning me to the bed, of the passion that followed, flooded my mind. My heart raced as my hand instinctively brushed against my warm neck where the marking marks had begun to fade. Every moment we'd shared felt impossible yet undeniable. Roman leaned closer, his eyes searching mine with patience that infuriated me. "That's your concern?" he asked softly, his lips quirking into a half smile. Frustrated, I grabbed his hand tightly, forcing myself to meet his gaze. "You were the one who initiated it," I stated firmly, determined to preserve some semblance of dignity in this mess. My voice wavered slightly, but I ignored it. Roman's smirk softened as he turned my words over in his mind. Then, ever so slowly, his lips brushed against the back of my hand. "Yes," he admitted, the single word filled with more conviction than I had braced myself for. It felt like all the tension that had been suffocating me since last night finally shattered. A lump rose in my throat as tears welled in my eyes. My vision blurred, but I could still see the gentleness in his expression. Before I could think it through, I was throwing off the covers and wrapping my arms around him. I buried my face in his chest, letting the tears flow freely. "You scared me," I cried, my hands gripping the back of his shirt as if he'd disappear if I let go. "I thought you wouldn't admit it. I thought you would reject me." The idea had haunted me all night and morning. I hated how much power it held over me. Roman's hand rested against my waist, steadying me as I sobbed into his shoulder. "Silly little wolf," he murmured with a blend of exasperation and affection. His fingers gently stroked my back, calming me through our bond. "You're so cruel," I hiccuped through tears, glaring up at him with puffy eyes. He chuckled under his breath, his lips curving into a rare, genuine smile. He leaned back just enough to cup my cheeks, wiping away the damp trail of tears with his thumbs. "Are you done crying now?" he teased lightly, though his voice carried a note of amusement. "No," I shot back stubbornly, though the warmth in his tone had already started to soothe my spiraling emotions. Roman's hand slipped down to gently tuck me back into the blankets. "You need rest," he said simply, ignoring my pout. His effortless control of the situation only made me feel more ridiculous. But his tender care soothed something deeper inside me. Instead of fighting him further, I let him adjust the blankets, and finally, I felt the tension ease from my body. Still, even as he stood to leave, a flicker of fear returned. "Where are you going?" I asked quietly, already feeling his absence before he stepped too far. Roman turned back, his ice-blue eyes softer than I'd ever seen. "Herbs," he replied, "to help ease your fever." Something in his gaze told me I didn't need to worry. And yet, as the door clicked shut behind him, I couldn't help but miss the steady presence of his warmth. Roman's. Downstairs, Aiden was pacing the hallway like a restless wolf. The moment he saw me, his head whipped around, and he marched right up with a scowl firmly planted on his face. "What the hell happened?" he demanded. "How could Scarlet get injured under your nose?" I waved a dismissive hand at him, though my patience was already running thin. "Not the kind of injury you're thinking," I replied evenly. Aiden frowned, suspicion flickering across his features. He crossed his arms, narrowing his gaze. "Then what kind of—" His words cut off mid-sentence as realization dawned on him. His eyes widened, his jaw slackening in disbelief. "Oh, God," he murmured, his voice a mix of shock and something dangerously close to amusement. You animal." His reaction was more grating than I expected. "She's called you brother for 20 years. Aiden exclaimed, loudly enough that I briefly considered hitting him on the head. "Lower your voice." My tone carried enough warning to make him flinch. That didn't stop him, of course. "Does Luna Catherine know about this? Does Natalie? What do you, Natalie? What do you think they'll say when they find out their sweet little Scarlet is now—" I didn't need to hear the rest. The heavy book on the table found itself flying at his head. Aiden caught it, though he stumbled a little before straightening up. "I mean seriously, Roman," he continued, his voice quieter but no less disbelieving. "She's inexperienced. You raised her like—" "Enough," I cut in sharply. But the healer wasn't finished. "I get it now," he said with growing exasperation. "Your protectiveness. The way you didn't let anyone even look at her. Hell, Natalie barely managed to keep her when she took her away, and you nearly ripped the world apart to bring her back. It all makes sense now." I had no intention of indulging him, so I simply held out my hand, demanding the herbs. Aiden muttered under his breath, but he reached for the pouch anyway. He held it out begrudgingly, muttering half-hearted insults under his breath like the child he claimed not to be. "Beast," he muttered once more as I turned to leave. When I returned to Scarlet's room, she was already half asleep. Her breathing was uneven, and her fever hadn't subsided yet. I woke her gently, placing the herbs against her lips. "Take this," I told her. She grimaced at the bitter taste. "Bitter," she mumbled, half-conscious. "It'll help," I murmured back, the mate bond thrumming between us as I coaxed her to finish it. Her sleepy expression softened, and as she drifted back into slumber, I remained by her side, silently guarding her through the long night. Chapter 150. Recovery and Revelations. Aiden shoved the door open with his usual lack of subtlety, a triumphant smirk plastered on his face. He held up a small bag in one hand as though it contained a miracle. "Delivery for the overprotective alpha and his little mate," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. I looked at him flatly, my patience already thin. "Do you always talk this much, or do you save it especially for me?" Aiden shrugged, unbothered. "Consider it one of my many gifts." He set the bag on the table, leaning against the edge with exaggerated casualness. "Special herbs for Scarlet's injury. But there's something you need to hear, and you probably won't like it." I raised an eyebrow, my silence prompting him to continue. "You need to avoid intimate interactions for a while," Aiden said, wagging a finger at me like I was a student in trouble. A grin tugged at his lips. "Doctor's orders. She needs time to heal. Roman. No exceptions." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as I stared at him. "Choose your next words carefully," I said, my voice low, the kind of tone that sent lesser wolves running. Aiden's grin faltered only slightly before he cleared his throat. "Relax. It's for her benefit," not yours. And another thing, you really should consider heading back to the Eastern Territories. The sacred springs won't help her out in her current condition, and the cold weather here is only making things worse. I remained silent, weighing his words. He was right, though I wasn't about to admit it to him. He leaned forward conspiratorially. Also, did you know Marcus Winter is still trying to see her? Persistent little guy. He's practically camping outside, waiting for crumbs of your attention. I barely reacted, simply folding my arms across my chest. You knew, Aiden said with mock surprise. Of course you did. Nothing gets past the great Roman Thorn, the Shadow King himself. He cupped his chin like he was deep in thought. Get to the point, Aiden. My patience was wearing thin. Okay, fine. Here's a nugget of gossip to chew on. He leaned in smugly. Did you know Grace dated a rogue leader's son a few years back? Scandalous stuff, huh? Enough. My voice sliced through the air like frost. Aiden raised his hands defensively. All right, I get it. Only mate-related topics interest you. No room for juicy side stories. You're no fun, Roman. I didn't respond, my ice-blue eyes fixed on him, until his smirk disappeared entirely. After a long pause, he sighed and placed the herbs more carefully on the table. Here. These should speed up her recovery, Aiden said more seriously. Then he added under his breath, not that you'll thank me. His eyes lit up mischievously again. But good luck with that whole no intimacy advice. Judging by your track record, I'd say the odds aren't in your favor. I let him leave without another word, his muttering clearly meant to test me, but I had no time for his games. After he left, I grabbed the remedies and returned to Scarlett's room without hesitation. The phone slipped slightly in my shaky hands as I listened to Sarah's voice become increasingly furious. You should be panicking, Marcus. Did you even hear me? Scarlett was raised by the Thorn Pack, by that family. Roman Thorn and his mother raised her like one of their own. Do you know what this means? Her words thundered in my ears, each sentence louder and angrier than the last. I said nothing, still attempting to process the gravity of what she had just revealed. Of course you don't, Sarah snapped, her voice shaking slightly as she continued her tirade. How could you? You've been so focused on Grace, on maintaining appearances, that you let Scarlett slip right through your fingers, and now she's tied to one of the most powerful alphas in the world, and we're on the brink of ruin because of it. Sarah, I said hoarsely. It was all I could manage. No, she cut me off sharply. You need to hear this. Scarlett, she's not just some girl we can manipulate. She's practically the sister to the Shadow King. Do you know what that makes us? Insignificant. Totally, utterly insignificant. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, the weight of her words suffocating. What do you expect me to do, Sarah? I finally asked, my voice low. She's blocked me from every channel, and Roman. I didn't need to finish the sentence. She knew as well as I did that Roman Thorn was not a man to be trifled with. You're the alpha, Sarah hissed. Act like it. Persuade her. Remind her that Grace needs her and that she owes her family. Her desperation was tangible, and part of me wanted to believe it was still possible. But deep down, I knew the futility of her words. I ended the call abruptly, unable to endure another second of her anguish. My car swerved sharply as I made a sudden decision, heading straight for Roman's private estate, my heart pounding. It was reckless, foolish even, but I had no choice. I stepped into Scarlett's room quietly, finding her propped up in bed. Her eyes fluttered open as I approached, her emerald gaze foggy with lingering exhaustion. Roman, she murmured, her voice hoarse but soft. I'm here, I said, sitting on the edge of the bed with the remedies Aiden had provided. Carefully, I pulled back the blanket to check her injury. She tensed slightly, her eyes widening as she realized what I was doing. What are you doing? She stammered, her cheeks flushing a soft pink. Applying the salve, I answered evenly, not stopping my movements. You need proper care if you want to heal quickly. I can do it myself, she mumbled, clearly embarrassed. Your hands were shaking earlier, I pointed out. Let me take care of it. Her lips parted slightly as though she wanted to argue, but she closed them almost immediately, too tired to fight. Instead, she covered her face with her hands, groaning softly. This is so awkward, she muttered, her voice muffled. You're shy now? I teased lightly, a rare smirk playing at the corners of my lips. Her groan deepened, and I couldn't help but chuckle lowly. There was something endearing about the way she tried to hide her flustered state. After finishing the application, I sat back watching her as she slowly dropped her hands from her face. Her cheeks were still flushed, and she refused to meet my gaze. "Scarlett," I said, leaning closer. Her eyes flicked to mine briefly before darting elsewhere. "What?" she stammered. "We're returning to the Eastern Territories tomorrow," I informed her. "The sacred healing springs here won't be effective in your condition. The cold weather isn't helping either." She sighed softly, sinking further into the pillows. "Whatever you think is best," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, satisfied that she wasn't putting up a fight. From the look in her eyes, I could tell she was as eager to leave the Northern Territories as I was. Handing her a bowl of warm soup, I watched as she slowly ate, her movements shaky but determined. She finished only half before her hands trembled too much to continue. Satisfied that she had eaten enough for now, I bundled her up in the blankets once again, ensuring she was warm and comfortable. "Rest," I said softly, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "You need your strength." "Okay," she murmured, her eyes already growing heavy. Chapter 151, Dangerous Confessions. Ugh. When I woke up again and tried to stand, a sharp pain shot through my legs. I collapsed back onto the bed, biting down on a cry. Roman noticed instantly. His ice-blue eyes, usually cold and calculating, softened with concern. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice quiet but firm. I felt tears welling up, shame and pain mixing together. My pride prevented me from answering immediately. But the throbbing ache in my legs forced me to look at him, my defenses dropping. "It hurts," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. He moved closer, kneeling before me so that his face was level with mine. His brows furrowed, and for a moment I thought I saw guilt flicker across his face. Without a word, Roman leaned in and kissed my forehead. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice carrying a weight that almost made me want to forgive him immediately. I felt my heart ache at his tone, but confusion clouded my thoughts. His apology was earnest, yet it raised more questions than it answered. "Sorry," I whispered, searching his face for an explanation. Do you remember everything?" Roman tensed slightly, a reaction so subtle that I might have missed it if I wasn't staring at him so intently. Then he smiled. It wasn't an apologetic smile or even a teasing one. It was the kind of smile that made my stomach churn because it held a truth I wasn't prepared for. "You remember," I said, my voice rising. He didn't deny it. That smile told me all I needed to know. "You tricked me," I accused, my emotions bubbling over. I felt anger, embarrassment, and the echo of last night's events swirling into chaos. Before I knew it, I lunged forward and bit down on the side of his neck, not enough to truly hurt him, but enough to prove my point. Roman chuckled, the sound reverberating against my skin. "Cora's influence?" he teased, clearly unbothered. I pulled back, glaring at him as frustration fed my anger. "Don't act so smug," I snapped, crossing my arms. "You let me believe you didn't remember. How could you do that?" Roman, ever amused, raised a brow. "And you let me think that you didn't enjoy last night." I felt my face flame at his words. There was no escaping him, no winning in this one-sided exchange. And he cut me off smoothly. "You're adorable when you're flustered, Scarlett, but naive. Always so naive." That did it. His teasing sent me over the edge. "I am not naive," I retorted heatedly. My voice cracked slightly, but I pressed on. "You think managing a healing center, negotiating contracts, and dealing with wolves who want me dead makes me naive? For the last 3 years, I've handled everything on my own." Something in Roman's eyes softened as I finished. My anger didn't seem to faze him. If anything, it made the corners of his mouth quirk upwards even more. He leaned back, clearly enjoying the fire in my words, and very successfully too, I might add. I inhaled sharply, annoyed at his calm acknowledgement of my accomplishments. "I can't even walk right now because of last night," I grumbled, narrowing my eyes at him. "Don't act like everything is fine when it's not." Roman tilted his head as though contemplating my complaints. "Then it's only fair I carry you," he said without hesitation. Before I could argue, he scooped me up into his arms effortlessly. "Roman," I protested, but my body betrayed me. I leaned into him, my cheek brushing against his chest. The deep thrum of his heartbeat was calming, and I hated how safe I felt there. He adjusted his hold slightly, making sure I was comfortable before shooting me a knowing glance. "No complaints now," he said matter-of-factly. My heart raced as I stared up at him. Everything about this felt surreal. Roman Thorne, my adopted brother, my mate. After last night, all the lines we'd carefully maintained for years were now blurred beyond recognition. I held my breath as Roman carried me, wondering if this change would truly last or if the reality of it would shatter the fragile balance we'd just created. Third person's POV. As Roman descended the stairs with Scarlett securely in his arms, the atmosphere shifted. Hunter stood by the doorway, his stance alert yet relaxed. He tipped his head respectfully at Roman. "You're leaving?" Hunter asked, though his sharp eyes had already pieced together the answer. Roman nodded once. "Return to the organization headquarters. I want updates on everything by tonight." Hunter's gaze flickered briefly to Scarlett. His sharp instincts picked up on the subtleties, her bundled winter coat, Roman's calm but possessive demeanor, and the faint tension in the air. It didn't take him long to piece together what had likely unfolded the night before. Aiden's reluctance to explain, Roman's rare appearance in Scarlett's room, and now her condition, the signs were all there. "Understood," Hunter said after a pause. As Roman began walking toward the door, Hunter hesitated briefly before speaking again. "Marcus Winter is outside," he said carefully. Scarlett's head turned slightly. "Outside? In this weather?" Hunter nodded, his expression unreadable. "He's been waiting in the snow for hours. Said he needed to talk to you." He said. Scarlett frowned, guilt threatening to surface. Roman noticed her reaction immediately and looked down at her. "Do you want to see him?" he asked. Scarlett hesitated, unsure of what answer to give. Before she could decide, Hunter stepped in. "It's not Scarlett he's here for," Hunter added. "The message was meant for you, Roman." Roman's expression darkened. The icy edge returned to his aura as he tightened his hold on Scarlett protectively. "If it's for me," Roman said coldly, "then I have no interest in entertaining him." Hunter dipped his head in acknowledgement. Third person's POV, outside, Marcus Winter. Marcus Winter stood in the bone-chilling cold, unmoving despite the thick blanket of snow accumulating around him. The swirling winds cut through his coat, but he barely noticed the discomfort. His focus was singular, getting a moment with Scarlett and Roman. He blinked against the snow as the heavy door to the estate opened. Relief briefly flickered in his eyes. Then he saw them. Roman, tall and commanding, stepped out into the cold without so much as a shiver. Scarlett was wrapped in a white coat, nestled against his chest, as though he was shielding her from the world itself. "Scarlett," Marcus called, taking a step forward. Two enforcers appeared immediately, blocking Marcus from approaching. "Wait," he shouted, desperation lacing his voice. "Please, Scarlett, I have to speak with you." Scarlett didn't turn. She tightened her grip on Roman's coat, burying herself further into his embrace. "She doesn't want to speak with you," Roman said, his tone colder than the snowstorm around them. Marcus's desperation spiked. "I'll do anything. Please, Scarlett, you've misunderstood us. Just give me a chance to explain." Roman helped Scarlett into the sleek black SUV waiting nearby, ignoring Marcus's continued pleas. As Roman prepared to enter the vehicle himself, Marcus reached out, boldly grabbing the edge of his coat. "Please," Marcus begged, his voice trembling with both cold and guilt. "I'm her father. I'll fulfill any of her requests. Just let me speak to her." Roman turned his head slightly, his ice blue eyes glinting dangerously. "What could she possibly need from you?" Roman asked sharply. Marcus faltered, his mind flashing back to the meager allowance they'd given Scarlett in her youth, her shabby clothing when she lived with their pack. The shame was unbearable. "You couldn't even protect her from a death attempt by rogues," Roman continued mercilessly. Marcus winced. The truth in Roman's words cut deeper than any blade. "It was a misunderstanding." Roman scoffed, brushing him off and climbing into the vehicle. Through the partially lowered window, his voice echoed like a death knell. "As her parents, you're unforgivable." The SUV drove away, leaving Marcus standing in the cold, at Roman's words slicing through what little defiance he had left. Inside the warm vehicle, Roman held Scarlett close. "Why didn't you kill Grace during the rogue attack years ago?" he asked quietly. Scarlett leaned into him, her voice soft but firm. "I was outnumbered." Roman's eyes darkened, an ominous glint reflecting the storm inside him. Chapter 152, Eastern Territory, Thorn Pack House. The cold morning air bit into my face as I walked into the winter pack house, a worn man tethered to the exhaustion of sleepless nights. Sarah's calls had been relentless all night, pestering, nagging, accusing. I was beyond drained, and my nerves were frayed to the core. The moment I stepped through the front door, Daniel appeared, waiting in the grand hall like a predator itching to jump on his prey. His expression was an unholy combination of anger and frustration, his pacing steps punctuating his rage. "Father," he barked, his voice sharp and grating like nails against a blackboard. "Are you even remotely aware of the destruction Scarlet has caused us?" His hands clenched into fists, his knuckles whitening. "She sold herself to Roman Thorn. That's the only explanation. Is this her revenge? Destroying the Winter Pack, ruining us because of some petty grudge?" His words seared into my ears, carrying with them a level of venom that shocked me. Even though I had expected foolishness from him, this was uncharted territory. "What did you say?" I snapped, my voice cutting through his angry rant. Daniel stopped his pacing, turned to me, and met my glare head-on. His tone grew venomous, his emotions spilling over. "Scarlet, she's using Thorn like a dog, controlling those damn shadows to destroy our resources. And for what? Revenge? Selfishness? I'll tell you what she is. She's nothing but... Enough!" The word roared out of me like thunder, leaving Daniel visibly startled. For a moment I was silent, the weight of my anger settling into the room like a thick, suffocating fog. My pulse thudded violently in my ears as I stepped closer to my impertinent son. The stupidity, the sheer lack of foresight in his behavior was driving me mad. "Do you hear yourself? Do you comprehend the idiocy that just poured out of your mouth?" My finger jabbed into his chest as I glared up at him. "Have you even stopped for 1 second to consider the consequences of your words or your actions? Scarlet isn't the enemy here. We are the ones who failed her, time and time again." Daniel took a cautious step back, but defiance still flashed in his eyes. "She's not a victim," he countered, his tone rising. "She's manipulative. She was raised by the Thorn Pack," I interrupted, the words falling like a sledgehammer in the center of the room. The reaction was instant and exactly what I expected. Daniel froze, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. "You heard me. Our simple healer, as you so often like to call her, wasn't just anyone. She was raised by Liam and Catherine Thorn. She is Roman Thorn's sister. Or more accurately, his adopted sister. That same Roman who now commands the entirety of the Shadows and the Eastern Territories." My voice dropped lower as I let the revelation sink into Daniel's dense skull. He stared at me, his face a mask of strange emotions, confusion, disbelief, anger. "That can't be true," he eventually stammered. "It is," I confirmed sharply, taking no pleasure in the truth but knowing the gravity of making him realize our dire predicament. "And Roman is furious. You know why?" Daniel didn't respond. He wore an expression of pure shock. "Because of how we treated her," I continued, my voice laced with contempt for our mistakes. "The things we turned a blind eye to, the rogue attack, the blatant favoritism towards Grace, all of it, everything we did to Scarlet is why we're in the mess we are now." The room grew painfully quiet except for the faint hum of the heater near the walls. Daniel suddenly looked like a child caught in his lies, undone by mistakes he thought he could escape from. "What do we do now?" he finally asked, his voice barely audible. "What you should have done years ago," I snapped. "Fix it. Find Scarlet. Apologize. Do something. And if you dare, go groveling to Grace instead of focusing on fixing this monumental mess we've made." I left the sentence unfinished. The gravity was clear. He nodded slowly, though I could still sense his resentment beneath the surface. But I didn't have the patience nor time to deal with it further. He would either handle it, or he wouldn't survive the fallout. The soothing warmth of the beach house tucked me into its gentle cocoon as Roman carried me inside. His arms were strong and steady, his careful movements speaking volumes of his concern. The storm of fever that had racked my body had lessened, but I still felt weak, my limbs heavy and my mind clouded. He set me softly down on the couch, ensuring the warmest blanket we had was wrapped snugly around me. His piercing ice-blue eyes, so often terrifying and calculating, were now soft, even tender. "Comfortable?" he asked, his voice low and soothing. I nodded, sinking deeper into the cushions. "Yes," I mumbled. For several moments, Roman stayed close, adjusting the pillows behind me and brushing stray strands of hair from my face. His presence was grounding, and my wolf, Cora, purred contentedly in the back of my mind. As I watched him carefully cater to me, a lingering fear surfaced, wrapping itself around my thoughts. How do you think Luna Catherine will react?" I asked hesitantly, huddling deeper into the blanket. Roman raised an eyebrow, his lips tugging into a faint smirk. "Why do you ask?" "You know why," I said, my voice tinged with nervousness. His smirk widened, amused, not cruel. "Then tell her it's my fault," he said simply, his tone laced with mischief. "Tell her I didn't give you any choice." Despite myself, a small laugh escaped, though it quickly turned into a cough. "You're unbelievable," I whispered, shaking my head. He leaned forward, his hand grazing mine. "How is being honest unbelievable?" I stared at him, my heart swelling with emotions I couldn't explain. He knew exactly what he was doing, and yet I couldn't help but be charmed by his effortless confidence. "You're ridiculous," I muttered affectionately, tightening the blanket around me. "And you should rest," he replied, brushing his hand gently against my forehead before standing. "I'll handle everything else. Sleep." And with that, he left, disappearing outside to handle whatever mattered beyond the walls of our sanctuary. I drifted into a light slumber, but my phone buzzing snapped me back to reality. Blinking groggily, I reached for the device, Emma's name flashing across the screen. "Emma?" I answered, my voice hoarse. "Scarlett! Oh my God! You will not believe what I just saw!" she exclaimed, her excitement crackling through like static. I sat up a little, suddenly curious despite my exhaustion. "What happened?" "Grace," she said, drawing out the name dramatically. "She was humiliated, Scarlett. I mean, kicked out of the healing den, with Alexander trying and failing to stop it." I froze, taken aback by the mental image Emma painted. Humiliated? Grace? Despite everything, the description was hard to picture. "Why?" I asked suspiciously. Emma cackled, thoroughly enjoying herself. "Because someone up there clearly wanted her gone. No healing center in the Northern Territories will touch her after this. Trust me, I asked around. It's like she's been blacklisted." I let her continue as the gravity of Emma's revelation began to settle. Grace's support was crumbling, and even Alexander hadn't been able to stop it. And for the first time in years, I felt the tides of power shifting. Roman's hand, no doubt. Although I wouldn't admit it aloud, the knowledge filled me with a flicker of warmth. Silent gratitude for the man beyond the beach house door. Chapter 153, Dangerous Deterioration. The world around me blurred in and out as another wave of searing pain coursed through my body. My trembling hands gripped the sheets of what felt like the coldest bed I had ever laid on. The cheap motel room reeked of mildew, a far cry from the pristine healing den Scarlett had created. My breathing was shallow, every inhale like knives cutting through my lungs, the poison coursing freely through my veins with no relief in sight. "Mother," my voice was cracked and dry as sandpaper. It hurt to speak, but desperation propelled my words forward. "You have to help me. Please. I can't take this anymore." Sarah Winter, my mother, or was she even really my mother, looked at me with a horrified expression. Her hands fluttered uselessly over my body, unsure where to start or how to soothe the agony I was in. I'll find her. I'll make Scarlett listen." Her voice shook, and the usual hardened Luna demeanor she carried had vanished completely. "She won't listen," I gasped, the taste of blood coating my tongue. "She hates me, and for good reason." Sarah froze. That truth, ugly as it was, hung heavily in the air. "What are you talking about?" Her voice, sharp and frantic, broke the silence. "Grace, you're rambling. You're not making any sense." I bit back a scream as the pain shot down my arm, leaving my fingertips icy and numb. My vision blurred, but the room seemed smaller now, shrinking and suffocating me. I ordered it. Each word felt like another stab in my chest. Ordered what? Sarah's tone cracked at the edges, her fear unmistakable. The rogue attack. My words spilled out between sobs. On Scarlett, years ago. I set it up, because I couldn't let her win. Sarah's face paled as though every ounce of blood had drained from it. "What did you just say?" I couldn't stop the confession now. Her expression cut deep, but not as deeply as the suffering within me. I hated her. She always looked at me with such judgment, like I didn't belong, like she was better. My voice rose despite the pain. I wanted to humiliate her, to prove I was the rightful daughter. But now it's all coming back to me, Mother. I know she'll never forgive me. And the poison, Sarah, I'm dying. Please, go to her. Beg her. Just beg her to save me. Sarah recoiled. Her hand flew to her mouth as tears welled in her eyes. Grace, please, I begged, my tears soaking the pillow beneath me. She's the only one who can. She hates me, but no one else has the skill to stop this poison, and no other healer will touch me now. Please, Mother, do this for me. Save me. Sarah nodded, albeit reluctantly. Her trembling hands reached for her phone, making call after call. Each time the response was the same. Blocked. No answer. I watched her frustration grow with each rejection. Scarlett's made sure I can't reach her, Sarah muttered, her voice tight with panic. But she has to answer eventually. She has to. Tears blurred my vision as a horrifying truth sank in. Scarlett would never help me. I had burned that bridge too completely. The sun peeked through sheer curtains, spilling soft light into the cozy living room of Roman's seaside villa. I was nestled on the plush couch, propped up by an array of pillows. My legs still throbbed faintly from the ache left by past injuries, but at least now it was manageable. Roman's insistence on rest meant I had virtually nothing to do but lounge around, which wasn't a punishment. I peeled another orange from the bowl he'd brought me, savoring the tart sweetness as it spread across my tongue. The distant sound of waves outside was soothing, a steady rhythm that matched the calm enveloping me. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, interrupting the moment. Wiping my hands on a napkin, I reached for it with no urgency. I already guessed who it was. Emma's name flashed on the screen, confirming my suspicion. I smirked and answered casually. Good morning, Emma. You'll never guess what I just heard. Her voice was practically dripping with glee. Amuse me, I replied, popping a wedge of orange into my mouth. They're desperate, Emma started, drawing out the word. Marcus, Sarah, they're trying everything to get to you. Calls, messages, even showing up near the estate. It's pathetic. I laughed softly, unbothered. Let them try. They won't get through. There's more. Grace's condition is bad, Scarlett. Worse than before. The poisoning is spreading fast, and it seems healing centers in the area are refusing to treat her. Even the ones that owe the Amber Pack. Is that supposed to make me feel bad for her? I asked, rolling my eyes. No, but it's entertaining. Emma paused before her tone shifted, full of curiosity. What are you going to do if they keep pushing? Nothing. I leaned back, enjoying the moment. Let them squirm. They've earned it for everything they've done. Emma snickered. I almost feel bad. Almost. Before I could reply, my phone buzzed again. This time it was an unknown number flashing on the screen. Someone persistent, I murmured, already guessing who it could be. Grace, Emma guessed knowingly. Have fun with that. I hung up with Emma and answered the other call, my smirk widening as I prepared myself. Grace, what an unexpected surprise, I said sweetly, dripping with false politeness. Her voice, weak and trembling, came through the receiver. Scarlett, please, I need your help. Help? I asked, feigning confusion. I don't remember helping being part of our dynamic, but maybe you're talking about our $1 million bet? You do remember that, don't you? The line was silent, save for shallow breaths. Ah, wait. My voice turned teasing. You probably don't have the money anymore. You've had expenses, haven't you? Scarlett, Grace's voice cracked. I'm begging you. You must be mistaken, I replied casually. I don't accept pleas from troublemakers. You don't understand. Her desperation was palpable. I'll leave the Winter Pack. I'll cut ties with them. I'll do anything. I let the silence linger, savoring the shift in power. Goodbye, Grace, I said finally, cutting her off and ending the call. A deep, familiar voice behind me interrupted my satisfaction. Trouble? Roman's presence filled the room as he entered, his eyes immediately going to the oranges in my lap. I shrugged. Hardly. Just a bored troublemaker trying to get attention. Roman's gaze met mine knowingly. And how much attention did you give her? Enough to remind her who she's dealing with, I said with a smirk. He folded his arms, leaning against the wall. How many oranges have you eaten? I blinked at the random question. Why? They're acidic, he interrupted, and you're already pale. Moderation, Scarlet. All right, I muttered, pushing the bowl aside. Satisfied? Roman's expression softened slightly as he stepped closer. I decided to explain. Grace called about our bet. Honestly, she's just desperate now. I'll admit I'm enjoying seeing her squirm for once. His icy blue eyes stayed on me, unrateable. She won't pay you that $1 million. Of course not. I agreed. She has nothing left. Thomas Ward extorted her last bit of wealth using her own secrets as leverage. I froze, gripping the edge of the pillow. Thomas Ward? Roman nodded. My mind raced, dredging up memories of that horrifying rogue attack years ago. I narrowed my eyes, suspicion washing over me. You knew about Thomas? Roman met my gaze, his calm demeanor firm, but something in his silence spoke volumes. Roman, I pressed, my heart pounding. My voice dropped. What aren't you telling me about the attack? Chapter 154, Dangerous Revelations. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. Roman stood by the window, his posture relaxed, yet every part of him radiated authority. Roman, I started, my voice quiet but firm. What does Grace's sudden expulsion from the healing den have to do with you? His gaze shifted to me, his ice-blue eyes locking onto mine. A faint smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. He moved closer, and before I realized what he was doing, his arms looped around my waist. Effortlessly, he pulled me onto his lap as he sat down on the nearby chair. Careful, I gasped. A sharp ache flared in my lower body from our eventful night. He immediately stiffened, realizing his mistake. I forgot, he murmured, his voice soft with guilt. His hand rested on my thigh, his thumb lightly rubbing soothing circle. Are you all right? I tensed, unsure whether to yell at him or sink into the warmth of his touch. My body throbbed slightly, a stark reminder of my physical state. You shouldn't forget, I said, lips tightening in frustration. It's important that you remember. I'm not invincible. The amusement on his face softened into something almost tender. You're right, he agreed, his voice dropping lower. I won't forget again. His hands gently moved to my legs, his touch careful as though he feared hurting me further. Let me help, he said, beginning to massage the sore muscles in my legs. I narrowed my eyes at him, partially suspicious of his sudden attentiveness. Helping or earning forgiveness? I asked, trying to keep my tone light, even though my body relaxed with each movement of his hands. His lips curved into a smirk. Can it be both? I rolled my eyes but said nothing, the tension easing as the soreness in my legs melted into his soothing touch. Speaking of care, he teased, his hands briefly leaving my legs to meet my gaze, I think you need to add physical training to your schedule. Your stamina clearly needs work, running every morning once you're healed. I groaned internally. Is this your way of changing the subject? Of course not, he replied smoothly, his smirk widening. I let out a tired sigh. Typical Roman, deflecting with laughter when I tried to have a serious conversation. Grace, I said, bringing us back on track. I didn't miss the slight narrowing of his eyes at her name. He leaned back slightly, his hands still holding me securely as if refusing to let me go. Hunter handled her situation. Handled? He nodded. He paid Thomas Ward a visit. My lips parted in mild surprise, though. To be honest, I wasn't shocked. Roman's involvement seemed obvious to anyone who knew his overprotective nature. Thomas Ward, Grace's little blackmail problem, suddenly came to mind. If Hunter dealt with Ward, the pieces began to make sense. And, I pressed, narrowing my eyes at him, trying to gauge how deep his interference went. Roman tilted his head slightly, considering me. He merely reminded Ward of his priorities. I raised an eyebrow, certain there was more to the story. So, you're saying you didn't directly order Grace to be expelled? His fingers brushed my face as he tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. No direct orders, he answered, leaving just enough ambiguity to make me suspicious. I frowned. Still, you've trapped her. No healing, nowhere to turn in the Northern Territories. Yes, he confirmed without even a hint of guilt. I don't feel sorry for her, I admitted, leaning back into his chest, my voice steady. But I don't want chaos either. Leave her punishment to me next time. His arms encircled me possessively, drawing me closer. If it involves revenge fueled by your fire, then yes, but I'll always ensure you have the tools to win. His cryptic words stayed with me as he stood to leave, settling me gently on the chair as he adjusted his jacket. I'll be back later, he said. Rest for now. And with that, he was gone, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The peace didn't last. My phone buzzed angrily on the table. I reached out to grab it, eyeing the unfamiliar number on the screen. Hello? I answered cautiously. Scarlett. Scarlett. I froze, the familiar voice making my blood run cold. Natalie? 3 hours, she barked. Come to the border and bring something warm. It's freezing. Natalie's demanding tone made me grip the phone tighter. Her voice carried an edge of both annoyance and exhaustion. You're biting into my rest time, Natalie, I countered, though the trembling in my voice betrayed me. Don't talk back, she snapped. 3 years, Scarlett. 3 years. Running off to Northern Territories without a single notice? Do you have any idea the kind of search Roman sent after you? I felt guilt bubbling up, but masked it with mock irritation. I had reasons. We all have reasons, she cut me off sharply. Come and pick me up. If you tell Roman I'm here, I'll break both your legs. Her protective streak was as infuriating as ever, but I knew better than to argue when her temper flared. Fine, I said quickly, my mind racing at her sudden arrival. She wouldn't humor questions about her agenda, not until we were face to face. And Scarlett, her voice softened slightly, though the frustration stayed. Don't make me wait. The line went dead. Panic overtook me as the pieces began to align. Natalie was coming here, and coming here likely meant Roman had no clue. That left me in charge of managing a sibling reunion gone wrong. I groaned. My mating marks were far from healed. Natalie's sharp intuition would bulldoze through any excuse. Without wasting another second, I jumped up from the chair and went to find Roman. Searching for him, I ended up outside his private study. A strange noise hit my ears before I opened the door. A dull thud, followed by a deep, guttural cry of pain. I froze, my hand glued to the doorknob. My heart raced, unsure of what exactly I was about to walk in on. Curiosity got the better of me. I leaned closer, just enough to peer inside through the small between the door and its frame. What I saw made my stomach churn. Hunter stood above an injured wolf, his boot pressing the man's back into the ground. Blood pooled beneath them, deep crimson against the polished floor. Roman, he was seated on the chair a few feet away, his posture composed. The man on the floor groaned weakly. Please, I don't know where Vincent is, I swear. Hunter's face twisted into something colder, almost detached, as he increased the pressure with his foot. Lying won't save you. I felt bile rise as the man continued pleading, his broken voice ringing in my ears. I'm just a messenger, I didn't. A metallic click echoed through the room. My eyes darted to the silver bullet gun now in Hunter's hand, the barrel pressed against the back of the man's head. Hunter, the man croaked, choking on his panic. Please. The gun fired. My entire body jerked in shock at the deafening I hadn't meant to make noise, but my gasp was audible even to my own ears. The sound made Hunter halt, his sharp gaze snapping toward the doorway. My heart stopped. Who's there? Hunter demanded. I barely managed to step back before the door swung open. His eyes met mine, recognition and an odd glint of surprise crossing his face before he stepped aside. Roman's calm voice followed, cutting through the tension. Let her in, Hunter. My hands trembled as I stepped inside the room. The heavy scent of iron blood choked my senses as my eyes darted to the lifeless body on the floor. Roman rose from his chair, his gaze softening when it landed on me. Were you afraid? He asked gently, his presence immediately drawing me closer. I hesitated, torn between my fear and his pull. Then I moved toward him, the magnetic force that was Roman Thorne impossible to resist. With careful movements, he pulled me into his arms, his hold steady and warm. No need to fear, he whispered, his tone soothing while the icy edge of his earlier demeanor melted away. Chapter 155, Hidden Dangers. The chilling sight of Vincent Gray's enforcer sprawled lifeless on the floor lingered in my mind as Roman's eyes softened in contrast to the deadly intensity they'd possessed moments earlier. He was still holding me, as though I were made of glass, his hands, firm yet careful, wrapped protectively around my waist. I blinked at him, trying to ground myself amidst the whirlwind of emotions. Was that one of Vincent Gray's men? My voice was soft, cautious, unsure of how much I wanted to know. Roman nodded, his ice-blue gaze steady. One of his enforcers, he confirmed coldly. He had nothing useful to say. Nothing useful? My eyes trailed back to the bloody scene before me, my stomach knotting. Roman's calmness in the face of death was unnerving, but that was who he was, unshaken, untouchable. I opened my mouth to respond, but before the words could form, Roman's lips descended onto mine. For a moment my mind blanked. My heart slammed against my chest as his kiss captured every ounce of my focus. It wasn't soft or tentative. It was firm, claiming, and filled with unmistakable intent. The world around us faded, the bloodied body, Hunter's sharp gaze. Everything disappeared except for Roman. I snapped back to reality as soon as I remembered where we were. My hands pressed against his chest, pushing gently. "Roman, wait," I murmured, glancing at Hunter. The poor man looked as though he'd rather be anywhere else, his posture deliberately stiff, his head angled away in a half-hearted attempt to give us privacy. Roman's grip on me tightened, just slightly, his lips brushing against my temple as he whispered, "What's wrong, little wolf?" I swallowed thickly, heat creeping up my cheeks. "It's not the time or place," I said, gesturing vaguely toward the enforcer's body still sprawled on the floor. "And Hunter," I added, lowering my voice. For a moment I feared Roman might argue. His eyes flickered with something dangerous, possession perhaps, but then he exhaled softly, reluctantly loosening his grip. "It's not," he agreed, though his tone was low and edged with frustration. I stepped back, suddenly aware of how closely he'd been holding me. The tension in his posture hadn't eased, and his ice-blue gaze fell heavy on me. "Why are you here, Scarlet? You should be resting upstairs." His concern might have seemed endearing under different circumstances. At the moment, it felt stifling. "I came because I needed to talk to you," I said, lifting my chin slightly. "Natalie is on her way. She'll be at the border in a few hours." The shift in Roman's demeanor was instantaneous. His jaw tightened and his eyes darkened as comprehension dawned. "Natalie's coming here? Without an escort?" I nodded, bracing for his reaction. "She called and demanded that I meet her. She doesn't want you to know she's arriving." Roman's lips pressed into a thin line and his shoulders squared. Turning to Hunter, he barked, "Find her. Bring her back. I want every guard in her vicinity reprimanded for allowing this trip unapproved." Hunter snapped to attention, nodding sharply. "Yes, Alpha." Before I could say anything more, Roman scooped me into his arms. "Hey," I protested, squirming slightly. "I can walk just fine." "You shouldn't have to look at this," he said simply, his tone leaving no room for argument. I glanced over his shoulder, catching one last glimpse of the enforcer's lifeless form, as Roman carried me briskly out of the room. His arm shielded my face as we passed the mess, cutting my view off entirely. Back in my room, Roman set me down gently on the edge of the bed. He crouched before me, his fingers brushing hair from my face as though I might collapse at any moment. "You're running a slight fever again," he remarked, the back of his hand pressing briefly against my forehead. "I feel fine," I argued half-heartedly. I wasn't about to admit that my legs still ached or that I was utterly exhausted. Besides, I came here to tell you about Natalie, not to. Roman cut me off with a question that caught me off guard. "What do you want for dinner?" I blinked at him, thrown by the sudden shift. What?" "Dinner," he repeated, his tone matter-of-fact. "What do you want?" "Venison? Something warm? It might help with the fever." Despite all the seriousness that had consumed the day, I couldn't help the small laugh that slipped out. "You're really going to use my fever as an excuse to control what I eat?" His lips quirked upward slightly at my teasing. "Perhaps." His hand moved to my cheek, his thumb brushing gently against the flushed skin. "You need warmth, not excuses." I sighed, too tired to argue further. "Fine, venison sounds good." Roman tilted his head, studying me carefully. "Maybe not venison. What? You asked for suggestions, and now you're rejecting mine?" I complained, though the protest lacked any real bite. "You need something lighter to help with recovery," he said, rising to his full height. The way he loomed above me would have felt intimidating if his tone weren't so soft. "But don't worry, I know exactly what you'll enjoy." I wasn't sure whether I felt reassured or annoyed by that statement, so I settled for silence. As Roman adjusted the cuff of his sleeve, he leaned down slightly, his face coming unbearably close to mine. My breath caught as our lips nearly met, his gaze locked on mine with a heat that sent shivers through me. But then he stopped himself, pulling away with a slow exhale. "Now's not the time," he muttered, more to himself than to me, before heading toward the door. I watched as he adjusted his shirt, his movements stiff, controlled. Once he left, I sank back into the pillows, desperately wishing the world didn't feel so chaotic, yet wondering how I could ever want something different. That evening, I made my way to the dining room, determined to break free from the confines of my bed. Roman arrived shortly after, his damp hair curling slightly against his temples. As he stepped into the room, his gaze found mine almost instantly. "You're out of bed," he observed, his voice carrying a mixture of approval and concern. "I'm fine," I assured him, waving off his worry. "Besides, I wasn't going to eat in bed. That's where I draw the line." Roman frowned slightly, but didn't argue. "Fine," he conceded, moving to sit across from me. "But don't overdo it." I started on the meal before me, grateful that Roman had followed through with ensuring I'd enjoy it. For the first few bites, silence hung between us comfortably, the tension from earlier temporarily forgotten. "You're eating more than usual," Roman commented eventually, amusement flickering in his gaze. "I need the nutrients," I said, wrinkling my nose at him. "It's not every day someone gets dragged into shadow organization drama." He chuckled lightly. "Fair enough." By the time dinner concluded, I felt more relaxed despite the whirlwind of emotions that had followed me throughout the day. But relaxation didn't last long. Back in my room, Roman appeared again with the healing salve, clearly intent on reapplying it. "Let me handle it," I said quickly, reaching for the jar. Roman's eyes glinted with amusement, though he didn't immediately hand it over. "You don't trust me?" "It's not that," I countered, though my nervousness betrayed me. We don't need complications." "Complications?" Roman echoed, stepping closer. His tone was playful, his smirk widening as though he enjoyed watching my cheeks flush. I opened my mouth to retort, but his teasing expression left me momentarily speechless. The way his eyes sparkled mischievously made my heart pound an uneven rhythm. Chapter 156, Painful Consequences. Grace's POV. I was drowning in agony. The silver poisoning had surged through my veins, relentless and mocking. My body felt as though it were on fire, each second dragging on, each breath a struggle. The small stash of medicine I had left barely dulled the pain, its effectiveness diminishing with each dose. A plate of food sat untouched on the nightstand. I hadn't been able to stomach even the thought of eating, the mere smell turning my stomach. My frail reflection in the cracked mirror across the room bore a stark reminder of how much I had deteriorated. "Grace, please try to eat something." Sarah's voice broke the suffocating silence. She stood at the edge of the bed, wringing her hands. Worry etched deep lines into her face. I turned my head weakly, barely able to muster the strength to speak. My voice was barely a whisper, raw and brittle. "I can't. It hurts too much." Her lip quivered as she reached out to stroke my hair. "We'll figure this out, Grace. I promise." The front door slammed open with a crash, startling both of us. Marcus's heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway, his entrance filled with stormy tension. "Why didn't you call me sooner?" he demanded, his voice booming as he stepped into the room. His eyes swept over my pitiful figure, fury and helplessness twisting his expression. "Marcus," Sarah began, but he cut her off with a sharp gesture. "She's been like this all day? Where is Alexander? Why hasn't he come back yet?" Marcus barked, his voice rising in frustration. Sarah looked cornered, her composure slipping. "Victoria intercepted his calls, Marcus. She blamed me for everything and wouldn't let me explain. Do you expect me to fight her?" Another wave of pain jolted through me, and I let out a strangled cry. Both their heads snapped toward me, their argument momentarily forgotten. "She's getting worse," Sarah choked out, her tears falling freely now. "We have to do something, anything." Marcus paced the room, running a hand through his hair. "There's no one left here willing to help. Scarlett's cut her off completely. She won't even let the healers near us anymore." His voice was filled with desperation. Sarah shook her head furiously, her rage mingling with her fear. "She's ruthless, Marcus. This is beyond anything I imagined. She's trying to kill Grace." I don't want to die," I whimpered weakly, my voice cracking under the weight of my emotions. Tears rolled down my cheeks, mixing with the sweat of my fever. Marcus stopped pacing. His expression hardened. "We'll send her to Europe," he declared with finality. "It's the only option. Scarlett won't be able to reach her there." Sarah hesitated, then nodded slowly. What about the arrangements? We need to act fast. I'll deal with it, Marcus promised. He turned to me, his usually steely demeanor softening slightly. Grace, we're going to get you the help you need. Just hold on a little longer. The faint hope in his words barely reached me. I don't think I can, I whispered, my body trembling violently. You can, Marcus said firmly. You will. Daniels. When I walked into Grace's room, the sheer weight of the atmosphere hit me instantly. She was lying motionless on the bed, her breathing shallow and uneven. Her once radiant face was pale and gaunt, her body fragile like a porcelain doll about to shatter. Her eyes fluttered open when she heard me approach. Tears welled up and spilled as soon as she saw my face. Daniel, she rasped, her voice barely audible. I moved closer, trying my best to stay composed. I'm here, Grace. She reached for my hand with trembling fingers. Am I? Am I dying? The question made my chest tighten. How was I supposed to answer that? Her body, betrayed by the curse of the silver, spoke louder than any words I could muster. No, I said firmly, squeezing her hand. You're not dying, we're finding a way to fix this. Tears slipped down her cheeks. It hurts so much, she cried, her voice trembling. Everywhere, even breathing feels like punishment. I clenched my jaw, anger bubbling up against Scarlett. How could she do this? How could she have that much power? Daniel, she whispered, dragging my attention back to her. Is she gonna let me die? Will she really let this happen to me? Her fear was palpable, but it was her eyes, filled with despair, that gutted me. I hesitated. She's complicated, Grace, but we're not sitting around waiting for her mercy. Did you arrange for the healer? She asked, hopefully. A fresh wave of frustration surged through me. The healers, every single one of them, had refused. Scarlett's reach was terrifying, spreading poison into Grace's chances of survival. They won't come, I admitted. As the words left my mouth, her expression shattered. Then send me somewhere far, somewhere she can't touch me, she begged, her voice rising with what little strength she had. We're going to send you to Europe, I explained, gently squeezing her hand. We're arranging everything now. Grace blinked through her tears, silent for a moment. Then, with a hint of venom in her voice, she whispered, Scarlett, I won't forget this. One day when I'm strong, Grace, I interrupted softly. Focus on getting better. She glared at me for a moment before softening. Fine, she muttered, her anger subdued but not forgotten. I stayed with her until her exhaustion pulled her back into unconsciousness. As I stood, I felt the weight of Scarlett's growing influence pressing down on me. How had one healer become so untouchable, so unstoppable? Roman's hands moved over my legs with practiced ease, applying the healing salve to my lingering injuries. Despite how tender and careful his actions were, I couldn't stop the blush that crept up my neck and into my cheeks. Do you really have to do it? I muttered, squirming slightly. His ice-blue eyes flicked up to mine, unreadable as ever. Yes, he said curtly. Before I could protest further, he secured the bandages with the same precision and focus he always had. You don't trust me to do this myself? I challenged, though the edge in my voice wavered. No, he said simply, a teasing smirk playing on his lips. I let out an exasperated sigh, leaning back against the headboard. You're impossible. Unbothered by my complaints, Roman stood, peeling off his suit jacket and beginning to unbutton his shirt. Why are you undressing? I asked quickly, my voice rising in pitch as my flustered state multiplied. He raised a brow at me, his movements unhurried. I'm getting ready for bed. I blinked. What, here? He chuckled softly, shooting me a knowing look. Where else, little wolf? I sat upright, ignoring the ache in my muscles. But, isn't it improper? Roman tilted his head, his amusement growing. Imperfect? Whose definition of improper are we discussing? Because I don't care for most of those. I opened and closed my mouth, struggling to form a coherent argument. You're Roman Thorn, the Shadow King. People already think if they knew you were here, they'd talk. He rounded the bed with easy, graceful movements, halting directly in front of me. Leaning down, he cupped my face with both hands. And what, Scarlett? He asked in a low voice, his breath brushing against my skin. Would they be saying? I swallowed hard, the intensity of his gaze stealing my words. Does it matter? He continued, his voice soft but firm. You cried for me to take responsibility, did you not? His words hit me like a battering ram. "I didn't cry," I mumbled, though the heat in my cheeks betrayed me. Roman's lips curved into a tender smile, his thumb brushing lightly over my jaw. "Scarlett, stop overthinking. Let them talk. Let Catherine scold. Let Natalie scheme. That's up to them. You, however, are mine, and you always will be." My heart squeezed painfully at his words. The weight of what lay ahead, the whispers, the accusations, the consequences, all swirled in my chest. "But Roman," I whispered, my tears blurring my vision. "What if this changes everything?" Chapter 157, Intimate Tension, Scarlett's POV. I sat on the edge of the bed, chewing on my bottom lip as Roman's gaze pinned me in place. The faint flicker of amusement that danced in his ice-blue eyes wasn't helping my growing nerves. "The pack is going to talk," I muttered, finally breaking the charged silence between us. Roman tilted his head slightly, his posture relaxed as he leaned against the dresser. "Talk?" he echoed, his lips curving into a slow smirk. He pushed off from the dresser and crossed the room, each step deliberate and measured. Who would dare? I shot him a look, frustrated by his casual tone. "I don't think you understand. This isn't the same as handling a rogue enforcer. People gossip, they'll notice. And we—" He interrupted me with a low chuckle, dropping to sit beside me on the bed. "Silly wolf, let them talk." His fingers brushed against my chin, gently tilting my face up to meet his gaze. "Do you think anyone would dare to insult my mate in front of me?" My cheeks flamed at his words. His mate. The weight of those two words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. "Roman," I began, my voice uneasy. "That's not—" "Enough," he said softly, pulling me into the safe warmth of his chest. His tone was firm, leaving no room for further argument. "No one will harm you, Scarlett. Not physically, not with whispers. Let them try, it would be amusing." I sighed, relaxing against him despite myself. His calm, unwavering presence had always been my anchor, even when it frustrated me. But then his hand moved slightly, and something about the shift in his demeanor caught me off guard. The warmth of his touch wasn't unfamiliar, but there was an intensity now that sent a ripple of unease down my spine. "Roman?" I asked hesitantly, stiffening as I pulled back to look at him. His ice-blue eyes had darkened, holding a heat that stole the breath from my lungs. It was subtle at first, a mere flicker, but it burned brighter every time his gaze swept over me. I swallowed, trying to ignore the way my heart slammed against my chest. "You're not thinking clearly," I ventured, my voice trembling slightly. I'm still healing, remember?" He smirked, clearly amused by my nervousness. "Am I really that terrifying little wolf?" His hand moved up to my face, brushing a stray strand of hair from my cheek. I felt every nerve in my body react to the soft graze of his fingertips. "You're not terrifying," I stammered, my lips feeling clumsy around the words. "But, Roman Thorne, this is not—" The use of his full name only seemed to amuse him more. "Roman Thorne?" he repeated, his voice low and laced with amusement. I fought to keep a straight face despite the heat flooding my cheeks. "Yes, Roman Thorne. You need to listen to me." I insisted, mustering what little confidence I could, but his smirk only widened and his hand rested against my waist, pulling me just slightly closer. "I am," he murmured, his tone sending a jolt of panic through me. "But you're not exactly convincing me to leave." I could feel the flush creeping up my neck as I scrambled for words. "You should go, now, because my injuries are still—" His eyebrow arched and the edges of his smile turned teasing. "So what should we do about that?" Every coherent thought in my brain fizzled into nothing. His words hung in the air, and I couldn't tell whether he was deliberately pushing me for a reaction or genuinely considering something impulsive. "Roman, please," I whispered, my voice cracking with a mix of embarrassment and desperation. His expression softened slightly at my tone, but the glint in his eyes didn't fade. "I spoil you," he admitted, his voice gentle, yet edged with something deeper. "You're the only one who makes me question my control." I wasn't sure whether I felt flattered or terrified. Before I could process his words, he leaned back slightly, finally releasing me from his heated gaze. "You're right," he said, sighing as he stood. "You need rest, little wolf." I blinked up at him, relief and confusion warring in my chest. "So you'll go?" He chuckled again, grabbing my hand and pressing a kiss to my knuckles. "Only because you asked so nicely," he said before finally leaving the room. I let out a shaky breath as soon as the door closed, sinking back against the bed with my heart still racing. Third persons. Back at the Winterpack house, Grace sat upright in her bed, pale and trembling. The pain from the silver poison was evident in every shaky breath she took, but her frustration drowned out the physical agony. "Daniel," she said, her voice thin and hoarse. "You need to speak with Scarlett. It's the only way." Daniel, standing stiffly at the foot of her bed, crossed his arms over his chest. "Scarlett won't see us, Grace. You know that." "She has to," Grace argued weakly, her pale blue eyes wide with desperation. "If we don't reconcile with her with the Shadow Organization, we'll be ruined, Daniel. You know what Roman is capable of." Daniel's expression hardened as he avoided her gaze. "Scarlett is done with us. I can't waste time chasing after someone who doesn't care if we live or die." Grace's hands clenched the sheets tightly. "Don't you understand? She's not just angry at me. She's angry at all of us. If we bring her back, things could change. She could." "Stop," Daniel interrupted, his tone sharp. "She won't come back, Grace, no matter how much you beg, no matter what promises we make." Grace's face twisted with frustration and jealousy. "So that's it, then? You're just going to let her do this to us?" "To me?" Daniel hesitated, guilt flashing across his features. "I'll handle your treatment. You're leaving for the European territories soon." "That's not enough," Grace hissed, her hands trembling. "Don't you see? If Scarlett stays out there with Roman, she'll destroy everything." Daniel left Grace's room moments later, only to run into their mother, Sarah. Her expression was lined with worry as she approached. "She's no better, is she?" Sarah asked, her voice heavy. Daniel shook his head, his frustration seeping into his tone. "No, and I just got off the phone with her doctor. They've blacklisted her from treatment everywhere. This is Scarlett's doing." Sarah gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "You're sure?" Daniel nodded grimly. "It's not just the healing centers. I looked into it. Resources, trade agreements, everything is being cut. Everything." Sarah's face fell, her worry morphing into a mixture of fear and anger. "What are we supposed to do, Daniel? How are we supposed to survive?" "I don't know," he admitted, his voice low and strained. "But I'll figure it out." "Scarlett?" Later that night, I sat on the bed with my arms crossed, glaring at Roman as he leaned casually against the doorframe. "I've decided," I announced, my tone pointed. "I'm not talking to you anymore." Roman smirked, completely unbothered. "You don't have much of a choice," he replied smoothly, walking toward me. I bristled at his confidence, though part of me couldn't help but feel flustered under his gaze. "You need to learn boundaries," I said, narrowing my eyes at him. He tilted his head, his smirk widening. "Do I?" "Yes," I shot back, though my voice lacked conviction. Roman chuckled quietly, sitting on the bed beside me. His presence was overwhelming, his confidence unshakable. "Go to sleep, little wolf," he said softly. I huffed, turning away from him. "I'm still mad at you." "Oh," he said, his tone teasing. "If you don't want to sleep, then maybe I'll show you some other tricks." I froze, his words sending a mix of confusion and unease through me. "No, I will sleep now." Chapter 158, Morning After. Morning sunlight seeped through the nearby window, casting soft, golden rays over the room. I let my eyes flutter open, still caught in the haze of sleep. It was warm, the kind of warmth that made you want to stay cocooned in the blankets forever. Except it wasn't just the blankets. Roman's strong arm was wrapped around my waist, keeping me securely pressed against him. His steady heartbeat thudded gently against my back. My first instinct was to bolt upright, but my aching body immediately reminded me why that wasn't such a good idea. My face heated as memories of the night before surfaced with startling clarity. I wanted to bury myself under the blankets and never come out. "Awake already?" Roman's deep voice cut through my thoughts. The warmth of his breath tickled my ear, sending shivers down my spine. "That's rare, little wolf." I didn't trust myself to respond. His tone was amused, teasing as always, but I could feel the undercurrent of something else in the way his arm tightened slightly around me. My heart raced, the weight of what had happened between us suddenly feeling all too real. "You're quiet this morning," he mused, shifting slightly so his ice-blue eyes could meet mine. "Embarrassed?" "No," I snapped, though the heat rushing to my cheeks betrayed me instantly. I tried to squirm out of his hold, but his arm didn't budge. If anything, he tightened his grip, pinning me effortlessly. "I don't think I've ever seen you this flustered," he continued, his smirk widening. His thumb lazily brushed against my hip through the blanket. "You're usually so stubborn, always ready to argue. What's changed?" "Stop talking," I muttered, my face burning. I refused to meet his gaze, choosing instead to stare at a random spot on the wall. Maybe if I ignored him long enough, he'd let it go. But this was Roman. This letting things go wasn't exactly in his nature. "Why should I? I rather enjoy this side of you," he said, his voice dropping lower as he leaned in closer. "I especially enjoyed last night." My entire body went stiff. "Roman," I hissed, whipping my head around to glare at him. He chuckled, clearly unfazed by my glaring. "What? It's true, isn't it?" Before I could mutter a single word in response, my phone rang loudly on the nightstand. The sharp sound startled me, and I jumped slightly in his arms. I didn't need to look at the screen to know exactly who it was. Natalie. "Oh no," I whispered, my voice barely audible. I hadn't thought about how Natalie might react to everything that had happened. Just the idea of it made my chest tighten. Roman raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by my sudden panic. "Aren't you going to answer it?" "Nope," I said quickly, shoving the phone toward him as though it were a ticking time bomb. "You answer it, please." He shot me a look, but took the phone anyway, clearly entertained by my refusal to face my sister. "Coward," he teased under his breath before pressing the call button. "Natalie." The moment her voice came through the speaker, the air shifted. "Scarlett, you tattletale!" Natalie's tone was sharp and brimming with frustration. "Did you seriously have to get Roman involved? I was just trying to visit you. Now I'm being sent back like I'm some kind of rebellious pup." I sank further into the blankets, wishing I could disappear altogether. Why did Natalie always have to be so loud? Roman's expression hardened, his ice blue gaze narrowing slightly. When he spoke, his voice carried an unmistakable edge. "Natalie," he said slowly, each syllable carefully enunciated, "watch your tone when you talk about Scarlett." The change in his demeanor was instant and chilling. I felt it in the way his entire body seemed to radiate authority. On the other end of the line, Natalie faltered. I was joking," she stammered, though her voice lacked its usual confidence. "That's what siblings do, right? Joke around?" Roman didn't respond immediately. He leaned back slightly, his free hand resting possessively on my waist. "Explain why you're accusing Scarlett of anything," he demanded, his tone even sharper now. "I'm frustrated, okay?" Natalie finally blurted out, her words rushed. "You're always interfering, Roman. I just wanted to visit Scarlett, but no, Alpha King Roman had to step in and ruin everything. Do you even know how annoying you are sometimes?" I winced. Natalie was many things, but knowing when to stop talking was not one of her strengths. Roman's jaw tightened, but his voice remained eerily calm. "And you thought blaming your actions on Scarlett was the solution?" "No," she said quickly, her tone growing defensive. "I was just venting. It's not her fault, it's yours." If Roman wasn't holding me so tightly, I might have fallen over from sheer secondhand embarrassment. Natalie was definitely digging herself into a hole. Then, as if remembering why she had called in the first place, Natalie's tone shifted. "Wait," she said suspiciously, her words slow and deliberate. "Why is Scarlett even awake right now? It's so early. What's going on?" Panic flared in my chest. Of course she would notice something like that. Natalie might have been impulsive, but she wasn't stupid. Her pointed question left no room for misinterpretation. I tightened my grip on Roman's robe, clutching at the fabric as though it could shield me from her interrogation. Roman's eyes flicked down to me, amusement flickering in his gaze. I shook my head fiercely, silently begging him not to say anything that would make the situation worse. He smirked. Before I realized what he was doing, he grabbed my hand and guided it beneath his robe, pressing it firmly against his chest. My breath hitched as I felt the warmth of his skin against my palm. The action was bold and completely unnecessary, but Roman didn't seem to care. If anything, he looked even more entertained by my reaction. "Roman," I whispered harshly, trying and failing to pull my hand back. "What are you doing?" On the other end of the line, Natalie's voice cracked through the speaker. "What are you two doing?" she demanded, her tone sharp and accusatory. My face burned hotter than ever, and my voice refused to work. How was I supposed to answer that? My brain felt like it was short-circuiting. Roman, as calm and composed as ever, replied smoothly, "Are you curious?" The underlying threat in his voice was subtle but enough to send a chill down my spine. Natalie, predictably, panicked. "No," she said quickly, her words tumbling over each other. "I'm not curious. Forget I asked." I thought I might faint from pure mortification. Roman, on the other hand, seemed to be having the time of his life. "Then stop questioning Scarlett," he added, his tone leaving no room for argument. There was an awkward pause before Natalie spoke again, clearly trying to steer the conversation back onto safer ground. "Anyway," she said, her voice forcefully casual, "Scarlett, do you remember that time you tried to make a recovery potion and got everyone sick?" I blinked. "What? You don't remember?" she asked, her tone incredulous. "It was a disaster. Roman, Mom, and I were all throwing up for days. Honestly, Roman looked like he was going to kill you." My jaw dropped. What was she talking about? I had no memory of this supposed potion incident. None. Before I could process her words further, Roman's patience finally ran out. "Enough," he said sharply, cutting her off. Without waiting for her response, he ended the call and tossed my phone onto the nightstand. I stared at him, still reeling. "Did that really happen?" He turned to me, his expression unreadable. For a moment, he said nothing, letting the silence hang heavy between us. "Scarlett," he said finally, his voice calm and deliberate. "Your hand is still on my chest." My face turned scarlet as I yanked my hand away, suddenly aware of the lingering warmth beneath my palm. "Don't change the subject," I snapped, my embarrassment only fueling my frustration. Did I really make a potion that bad? Roman's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "We can discuss that later," he said, his tone teasing. "Roman," I groaned, my cheeks burning. But he only leaned back against the headboard, clearly enjoying my reaction. "You're adorable when you're flustered, little wolf." I sank deeper into the blankets, wondering if it was possible to die from embarrassment. Probably not, but at this rate, it sure felt like it. Chapter 159, A Morning After. Breakfast was the last thing on my mind. Any sparks of appetite I had were completely smothered by the oppressive silence in the dining room. I sat quietly at the polished wooden table, my fingers gripping the hem of my sweater nervously. The aroma of freshly baked bread and warm tea filled the air, but I hardly noticed. Hunter sat diagonally across, his expression neutral, yet I could feel his latent curiosity. The pack housekeeper bustled quietly in the background, her quick glances at me almost unbearable as an unspoken message hung heavily in the air. Somehow I was sure they both knew. Roman, sitting to my right, sipped his coffee casually, looking entirely unperturbed by the situation, so unlike me. My fingers tightened slightly as anxiety bubbled in my chest. Did he not care that this newfound bond of ours would inevitably lead to whispers? To questions? I could feel my face heating, imagining their thoughts. Was it that obvious? I lowered my head further, my hair falling into a curtain to shield my face. My scarf, wrapped snugly around my neck, felt like the only barrier protecting me from their prying eyes. The quiet was shredded by Aiden's arrival. His chipper voice sliced straight through my nerves. "Ah, breakfast smells amazing," he declared, grinning as he walked in. He set his medical pouch at the far counter before plopping into the seat beside me. I stiffened immediately. My hands fidgeted on my lap, and I ducked my head even further. Please don't say anything, I thought desperately. Aiden, completely oblivious, or so it seemed, chatted on with ease. "Scarlett's being very well behaved today," he observed, his tone teasing. "It's rare to see her this quiet during breakfast." My entire body flinched at his words. Was that a deliberate jab, or was he really this blind? Aiden leaned a little closer, which made my pulse spike uncomfortably. He pointed at my scarf with a bit too much interest for my liking. "Why a scarf indoors?" he asked, reaching for my neck. "Do you have a fever? Let me check." I jerked away instinctively, my hand flying up to shield the scarf. "Don't touch me," I muttered through gritted teeth, glaring at him from the corner of my eye. He froze for a second, seemingly confused, before smiling sheepishly. All right. No need to act so defensive," he said, retreating. At that moment, I couldn't tell if Aiden was truly clueless or deliberately playing with fire. Either way, I was ready to rip his head off. But Roman's calm and watchful presence next to me reminded me to stay in control. Barely, I thought angrily. If looks could kill, Scarlett's glare would have done the job spectacularly. She was wound tighter than a spring, a fact that didn't escape me. Still, I couldn't resist poking just a bit more. It wasn't every morning Scarlett was this quiet. Roman's presence probably had something to do with it. Or maybe that scarf, I thought curiously. And Roman, I said with a knowing grin, shifting my attention to him, you should really be gentler with our little healer when showing affection. That's when it hit me. Total silence. Scarlett's face turned a blazing shade of red, her gaze immediately dropping to her plate. Did I touch a nerve? Out of nowhere, a sharp kick landed squarely on my shin. I hissed, jerking back in surprise, my wide-eyed stare locked onto Roman across the table. His cold glare had laser precision, and the warning in his eyes could have frozen the sun itself. "What are you doing here?" he asked sharply, his tone cutting through the air like an executioner's blade. I blinked. Eating?" I gestured toward the housekeeper, silently asking for a plate. Roman's chilling gaze didn't soften. "There's nothing here for you this morning." I laughed awkwardly, waving in the direction of the breakfast spread. "Are you kidding? Everything looks great. You don't like it," Roman replied flatly, his tone brooking no argument. "Seriously?" I stared at him, baffled. "That's not true. I do like it. Why are you saying?" Another kick to my leg stopped me mid-sentence. This one even harder. I groaned, rubbing my shin and muttering, Fine. Whatever I said, I take it back." I glanced sideways at Scarlett. Her expression screamed embarrassment. Her body was ramrod stiff, and the way she cradled that scarf like a life preserver told me this was no ordinary scarf. So that's how it is, I thought. My grin faltered slightly. This bond wasn't just pack gossip, it was serious. And Roman? He was acting like a guard dog stationed firmly at her side. Even a playful comment like mine didn't fly under his radar. His protectiveness ran deep, uncomfortably so. Still, I wasn't about to back down entirely. "It's just a joke." I tried again, adding a nervous laugh. "You two are already mates. What's the big—" The next kick made stars dance in my vision. "Yeah, okay. Time to retreat." "You win," I said, throwing up my hands in mock surrender. Roman's eyes narrowed dangerously, and I could tell another joke wasn't in my best interest. I stood from the table, muttering under my breath. Can't even eat in peace these days. Guess I'll head to the kitchen. Happy now? Roman's sharp glare followed me all the way out the door. If this was his version of love, I honestly couldn't imagine what hate looked like. The awkward tension lingered even after Aiden left. My face still felt on fire from his earlier comments. My appetite, already weak, completely vanished. I poked idly at my plate, avoiding eye contact. Roman broke the silence after a few beats. His smooth voice carried playful annoyance. "If you keep lowering your head, it's going to get stuck in the bowl." I glared at him resentfully, though my chest warmed slightly at his obvious attempt to lighten my mood. He wasn't gruff. Not with me. Not when we were alone. That stark contrast to his behavior with others made it all the more difficult to stay annoyed at him. Roman beckoned to me with a casual flick of his hand. "Come here." Reluctantly, I stood and moved to his side, sitting down. Roman reached out, his fingers brushing against the scarf tied protectively around my neck. "What are you doing?" I asked quickly, covering it with both hands. The last thing I wanted was for anyone to see the marks, not when I wasn't ready to face the reality of what they represented. Roman chuckled lightly. His tone was teasing, but carried no malice. "Do you really think hiding it will keep it a secret?" His words struck like a hammer, crushing what little hope I had left that the marks were hidden. My heart sank. "Everyone already knows?" I whispered, horror creeping into my voice. "If not yet," he replied, placing a croissant on my plate, "they will very soon." My face paled, panic bubbled up in my chest. If word reached Luna Catherine, or worse, Natalie, I gripped Roman's sleeve tightly, needing reassurance. "Roman," I mumbled, my voice trembling, "I'm scared." He paused, his hand brushing against mine subtly. Through our mate bond, I felt his calming warmth spread. "Didn't I already tell you? There's nothing to fear," and I opened my mouth, desperation coloring my words. "You said I should. Say you forced me," I whispered, unsure. His ice-blue eyes flashed with something unreadable, a dangerous mix of amusement and defiance. His lips curved into a ghost of a smile. "Do you really think someone would dare question my reputation?" he asked softly. The subtle confidence in his voice sent my heart racing. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to look away from his piercing gaze. He made it sound so simple, so final. "I trust you," I whispered carefully. "But—" Before I could finish, Roman silenced me with a feather-light kiss, leaving me breathless. My lips tingled as he whispered, "Does my little wolf doubt me?" Tears welled in my eyes. I wasn't doubting him. I was terrified of the inevitable confrontation. My grip on his sleeve tightened. "Natalie's going to ask me questions. I don't know how to answer." Roman's hand tilted my chin, his fingers gentle but firm. Despite his alpha authority, there was immense tenderness in how he handled me. "You know what to say," he said confidently. I swallowed nervously before blurting the words. "When did it start?" Roman raised an eyebrow. "When did what start?" "You know what," I said, my tone accusatory. "Your feelings for me. You've been pretending they weren't there all this time." Roman chuckled deep in his chest, his gaze filled with knowing warmth. Instead of answering directly, he leaned closer. His scent, a mix of cedarwood and something uniquely him, overwhelmed my senses. I bit my lip, irritated by his teasing. "You scared me," I continued, voice trembling slightly. "Acting drugged. Making me think." Roman silenced me with another kiss, this one lingering just long enough to leave me speechless. His smirk widened when he pulled away. "You're mine," he said simply, the weight of his words settling firmly between us. Speechless, I let my guard fall completely. Roman's protective presence was both infuriating and comforting. It was clear I'd never win when it came to him. I glanced at the faint mark on his neck. Despite myself, I wanted to bite him again, this time purely out of spite. Chapter 160, Morning Complications. I leaned back against the counter in Roman's grand kitchen, sipping a mug of freshly brewed coffee. The rich aroma and warmth brought an odd sense of comfort. For once, the icy tension from Roman's frosty glares wasn't lingering in the air like a heavy fog, at least not for now. I stepped out into the hallway and noticed Scarlett trying her best to avoid me. She moved quickly, her gaze darting to the floor as if she could blend into the wallpaper. "Hey, Scarlett!" I called out, knowing full well why she was being so evasive. Her shoulders jerked as if struck by lightning, but she didn't turn around. Instead, she picked up her pace. So, naturally, I followed her. "Scarlett, wait up," I pressed, grinning mischievously. When she glanced over her shoulder for the briefest second, her green eyes were wide with surprise and... was that panic? She came to a halt halfway down the hall, clearly realizing she couldn't outrun me. Her face was flush red, backing up against the wall like a cornered rabbit. "Good morning," I said cheerfully. "You look well-rested." Her eyes darted everywhere but at me. Good morning, Aiden," she muttered, her voice practically a whisper. I leaned closer, lowering my voice just enough to ensure only she could hear. "So how's the, recovery?" I wiggled my eyebrows exaggeratedly, knowing the implication would drive her insane. Her reaction was exactly what I wanted. It was priceless. She seemed to shrink into herself, her movements stiff and awkward. Her face, already red, turned about 3 shades darker. "Aiden," she hissed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you so rude?" "Rude," I repeated, the grin on my face growing wider. "I call it concerned. You should really be careful next time. Roman can be rough." I ended the statement with a playful wink. She practically combusted in front of me, lifting her hands as if to shield herself from my words. "Stop it," Scarlett snapped, her voice rising slightly before she dropped it back to a whisper. "Just stop it. Please, this is inappropriate, Aiden." "Is it, though?" I leaned back, mimicking a thoughtful expression. "I mean, I'm only making sure you're in tip-top shape. You know, as a healer and all that. I gave you my best salve, after all. How's it working? I guarantee it's effective, especially for such occasions." Her mouth fell open briefly, then snapped shut as she let out a strangled noise of utter humiliation. Without another word, she spun on her heel and practically sprinted down the hall, her auburn hair bouncing behind her. As she disappeared around the corner, I chuckled softly to myself. Poor Scarlett. Still not used to the whole mate thing, it seems. I took another sip of my coffee, the grin never leaving my face. But hey, at least the salve is working. That's when a familiar presence crept up behind me. I turned and immediately felt a chill run straight down my spine. Roman stood there, arms crossed, his ice-blue eyes narrowed and practically glowing with menace. "What?" he began in a tone so cold it could freeze fire, Exactly as your business with Scarlet, I immediately held up my hands in mock surrender. Relax, Roman. It's nothing serious, just a little friendly banter. You know, icebreaker stuff. His expression didn't change. If anything, his glare intensified. Icebreaker stuff? He repeated, drawling each word as though he was testing the weight of them. I cleared my throat, desperate to backtrack. Right, wrong choice of words. What I meant was, look, she's fine. The salve worked. She's all healed up. I don't recall asking for your opinion on her condition, Roman said quietly, though the threat in his voice was deafening. I gulped, backpedaling even further. Noted. Understood. Absolutely none of my business. Say the word and I'll vanish right now. Roman's icy gaze locked onto me for what felt like an eternity before he finally let out a low grunt, stepping past me toward his study. I didn't have to be told twice. I made a silent vow to steer clear of Scarlet for at least the rest of the morning, or ideally the rest of the week. Alpha, I said as I entered the dimly lit study. Roman was seated behind his massive oak desk, flipping through some documents. His piercing gaze flicked up to meet mine, the ever-present, unyielding authority radiating from him. "What is it, Hunter?" he asked. His voice clipped, his mood clearly still sour from whatever Aiden had done outside. "Hazel Walsh has arrived in the Northern Territories," I informed him. "She's accompanied by what appears to be Natalie's enforcers." Roman's fingers stilled. He closed the document casually, but the sharp edge in his gaze told me he was anything but calm. "Aiden's sister," Roman said, a statement more than a question. "And you believe Natalie sent her?" I nodded. "It looks that way. The enforcers were definitely from Natalie's group. This could be an attempt to lure Scarlet, or worse, to use Hazel in some sort of plot." A low growl emanated from Roman's chest. He leaned back slightly, his ice-blue eyes darkening further. "And Aiden?" "Unaware as of now," I admitted. "But it raises questions. Even if Hazel and Natalie never got along, their apparent collaboration cannot be ignored. If this is truly an orchestrated ploy..." Before I could finish, Aiden burst into the study, his face pale. "That's impossible," he exclaimed, clearly having overheard the conversation. Roman's eyes snapped to him with the force of a tightened whip. Aiden didn't flinch, though his expression was clearly troubled. "Natalie and Hazel would never work together. Not in a million years," he insisted breathlessly. "Perhaps that's what makes it the perfect cover," I countered, my tone firm. "What better way to mask a plan than to use two individuals known for their infighting?" A faint, almost imperceptible growl emanated from Roman again. He was weighing something in his mind, and I knew better than to interrupt. "They wouldn't," Aiden reiterated stubbornly, but his voice faltered as doubt gradually seeped into his expression. "Would they?" Roman stood slowly, his every movement deliberate. "It's irrelevant," he said, his voice cold as frost. "Whether it's collaboration or rivalry, Hazel Walsh will learn her place." "Wait," Aiden said quickly, his expression snapping to alarm. "Roman, what are you planning?" Without sparing him a look, Roman turned to me. "Take the enforcers. Ensure Hazel understands the consequences of overstepping." "No," Aiden exclaimed, stepping forward. His panic practically bled into the air. "She's my sister, Roman. You don't have to... She's stubborn, but she's not dangerous." Roman's eyes finally met Aiden's again, like an arctic wind cutting through flesh. His tone remained calm but carried lethal finality. "That's up to her." Roman appeared in the doorway of my room not long after. I was still half hidden beneath the covers, mortified by my earlier encounter with Aiden. When I saw who it was, I sat up quickly, my embarrassment still fresh. "Roman," I started, unable to keep the flush off my cheeks. He crossed the room in mere strides, sitting on the edge of my bed. "Still avoiding Aiden?" he teased, his lips quirking in a rare smile. I sighed heavily, burying my face in my hands. "He's impossible." Roman reached out, his fingers curling gently around my wrist as he pulled me closer. Before I could object, I found myself sitting in his lap, his arms wrapped securely around me. "You don't need to avoid him," he murmured, his voice soft against my ear. "Let him say what he wants. I'll make sure he never crosses the line." I looked up at him, my heart pounding as his ice-blue gaze held mine. "You're too calm about all this," I said, though a small smile tugged at the corner of my lips. Roman smiled faintly, the tension in his shoulders easing as he pressed a soft kiss to my temple. Because I already have what I want, he whispered. The mate bond between us hummed softly, like a warm cocoon enveloping my heart. For once, I allowed myself to fully relax in his embrace. No worries, no fears. Just us.